We will be fortunate to listen to him for a few minutes, and after that, we'll start our technical session. So, sir, may I request you to please give us blessings? Sir, yes, you will be chairing, sir. Please come. And आप आ जाइए ना, sir. Sir, the list has been changed. Revised list is not yet print, sir. It has been just verbally been conveyed. मैडम आएंगी? So, किसी ना किसी को तो आना है, please. आ जाइए मैम. हाँ हाँ. So now I'm handing over to ma'am Kanchan Saxena. Thank you so much.
के लिए बोला जाएगा, लेकिन मुझे खुशी है, मैं इसके लिए हृदय आभारी हूँ कि आपने मुझे पुनः अवसर दिया यहाँ पर आप लोगों के साथ सहभागिता करने का। और दर्शन का के जो कॉन्फ्रेंसेस होती हैं उनका उद्देश्य ही जो है वैचारिक विमर्श होता है, और यहाँ पर हम सभी उसी उद्देश्य की पूर्ति के लिए आए हैं, और विषय भी उसी से संबंधित है कि वाद, संवाद और आख्यान, इन सब के माध्यम से किस तरह से हम दार्शनिक परिचर्चा कर सकते हैं, और इस पद्धति के माध्यम से क्या हम दार्शनिक के साथ ही साथ सामाजिक और गैर सामाजिक समस्याओं का निराकरण भी कर सकते हैं। तो मुझे उम्मीद है कि आज के सत्र में जो भी शोध पत्र पढ़े जा रहे होंगे उनमें जरूर कुछ न कुछ ऐसी बातें हमारे सामने आएंगी, कुछ जरूर ऐसा ज्ञानवर्धन हम सभी को प्राप्त हो, उस विषय को लेकर आगे शोध कार्य या अपने विचारों को एक स्वरूप देने का प्रयास करेंगे। और अनफॉर्चुनेटली मेरे पास कोई लिस्ट नहीं है कि यहाँ पर किसके जो है शोध पत्र पढ़े जाने हैं, तो मैंने प्रारंभ किया है। और अब मैं चाहूंगी कि सिन्हा जी जो हमारे गुरु समान हैं, आप इसके ऊपर अपने कुछ विचार रखें। और सर के सामने मुझे अध्यक्षता का दायित्व दिया है, तो ये मुझे जो है सम्मान का विषय तो है, लेकिन मुझे थोड़ी दुविधा भी हो रही है कि सर के सामने प्लीज इसी को अच्छा मां से बोलेंगे।
आज की सभा की अध्यक्षता करते हुए डॉक्टर कंचन सक्सेना जी से कुछ सुनने का, कुछ समझने का आपको भी अवसर मिलेगा, हमें भी अवसर मिलेगा। डॉक्टर कंचन सक्सेना का निश्चित ही, चूंकि वो पहले से आई हैं तो इंट्रोडक्शन उनका आप लोगों ने कराया होगा। ये भी एक संयोग की बात है कि बहुत दिनों के बाद हमें भी आपका सानिध्य प्राप्त हुआ। चूंकि मगध यूनिवर्सिटी और ख़ास करके डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फिलॉसफी से मेरा संबंध रहा है, और आपको बताना चाहेंगे कि एक दिन के लिए मेरा अपॉइंटमेंट यहाँ हुआ था। जब 1969 में BHU से PhD करके अपॉइंटमेंट की तलाश थी, तो 3 जगह हमने अप्लाई किया, जिसमें पहला अपॉइंटमेंट रांची यूनिवर्सिटी, और ठीक उसके दूसरे दिन मगध यूनिवर्सिटी। और मगध यूनिवर्सिटी में ज्वाइन करने के लिए हम आए भी थे। डॉक्टर वाई मसीह, जो नहीं जानते होंगे, डॉक्टर वाई मसीह रसा गए हुए थे, वहाँ से वो लौट के आ गए थे और हमें ज्वाइन करना था। रात को, शाम को उनसे मुलाकात हुई और उन्होंने कहा कि गया कॉलेज में तुम्हारी पोस्टिंग होगी। तो मैं ज्वाइन करने के लिए आया। तब तक उसी समय पटना यूनिवर्सिटी के रजिस्ट्रार ने सूचित कराया। अब उस समय तो मोबाइल था नहीं, एक आदमी हमारे परिचित थे, तो उन्होंने सूचना हमको दी हमारे घर पर कि पटना यूनिवर्सिटी में नाम रिकमेंडेड है, आप आइए। तो मैं पटना यूनिवर्सिटी ज्वाइन किया। सभी टेम्पररी अपॉइंटमेंट थे। और BHU में हमारे सुपरवाइजर ने हमको हिदायत दे दी थी कि कहीं ना कहीं किसी न किसी जगह अपॉइंटमेंट जरूरी है। उसी समय प्रोफेसर SP दुबे, उनके भतीजा आए हुए हैं। तो SP दुबे हमारे बड़े गहरे मित्र थे। तो SP दुबे का मैकमास्टर यूनिवर्सिटी में दोनों, हमको भी फेलोशिप मिला था और प्रोफेसर SP दुबे को भी। और हमारे सुपरवाइजर प्रोफेसर RS मिश्रा के एक बहुत ही अभिन्न मित्र प्रोफेसर, उन्होंने हम लोगों को वहाँ बुलाया। तो प्रोफेसर SP दुबे चले गए और हमारे, अब चूंकि हम प्रोसेस में थे PhD सबमिट करने के, तो हमारे सुपरवाइजर ने कहा कि तुमको नौकरी, लौट के आओगे तो फिर नौकरी करनी पड़ेगी, तो इसलिए तुम PhD कर लो, छोड़ के मत जाओ। तो मैं PhD करने लगा। फिर यहाँ तो एक दिन के लिए मैं सिर्फ अपना मगध यूनिवर्सिटी का मैं लेक्चरर भी इन एब्सेंसिया, क्योंकि ज्वाइनिंग नहीं हुई थी, मेरा अपॉइंटमेंट हुआ था। तो जो लोग मगध यूनिवर्सिटी के हैं उन्हें बताने के लिए मैंने ये संदर्भ रखा। इसीलिए शायद मगध यूनिवर्सिटी का कोई कोऑर्डिनेटर या कोई रिप्रेजेंटेटिव या कोई अध्यक्ष हॉल में नहीं है, तो कोई भी बात नहीं, क्योंकि मैं भी अपने को यहाँ का एक अध्यापक ही मानता रहा बहुत दिन तक, और जब भी ज़रूरत होती है तो मैं आता रहा हूँ। सचमुच में जो विषय है वह एक अपने ढंग से निराला है, नया विषय है। और इसमें मगध यूनिवर्सिटी के संयोजक जावेद साहब हों या शैलेंद्र हैं, उनको मैं तहे दिल से बधाई देना चाहूँगा। और रेखा जी चूँकि आज कोऑर्डिनेट कर रही हैं, तो आप कोऑर्डिनेट कर रही थी तो आपको यहाँ रहना चाहिए। आप यहाँ आ जाएं तो अच्छा लगेगा, क्योंकि जब आपने कोऑर्डिनेशन की जिम्मेदारी संभाली है तो आप यहाँ बैठने की भी जिम्मेदारी संभालिए। हाँ, उनको भी इसलिए कि खाली खाली सुना सुना मंच अच्छा नहीं लगता है। हाँ बैठो। हाँ, जब मंच कंप्लीट होता है तभी आख्यान का अर्थ होता है। मैं विषय पर आना चाहूँगा, क्योंकि भूमिका समाप्त हो गई है। चूँकि एक्सटेम्पोर एंड अभी हमें मालूम हुआ कि हमें बोलना भी है, क्योंकि अध्यक्ष का काम सुनना है और संयोग से रोल बदल गया। तो मैं क्या बोलूं, और चूंकि भारतीय दर्शन की बात है, तो भारतीय दर्शन में आई कैन फॉर्मुलेट वन टॉपिक, दैट इज नरेटिव्स ऑफ फिलोसॉफिकल नरेटिव्स ऑन मनीषा पंचकम। चूंकि क्लासिकल इंडियन फिलोसफी की जब भी बात हम करते हैं तो निश्चित ही क्लासिकल इंडियन फिलोसफी पर अत्यधिक बल देते हैं, और क्लासिकल इंडियन फिलोसफी पर अगर बल देते हैं तो एक दार्शनिक जिसको जिसकी महत्ता निश्चित है वह है शंकराचार्य। तो शंकराचार्य द्वारा रचित मनीषा पंचकम का क्या नरेटिव है और किस तरह से मेरा अप्रोच होगा कि ईशावास्य उपनिषद और शंकराचार्य मनीषा पंचकम, इन दोनों, चूंकि शंकराचार्य वस्तुतः शंकराचार्य का नरेटिव ईशावास्य उपनिषद के नरेटिव से बहुत कुछ मेल खाता है, क्योंकि जब भी हम वेदांत की बात करेंगे तो बिना उपनिषद के पृष्ठभूमि के कोई वेदांत की चर्चा बहुत सार्थक नहीं बन पाती है। और दार्शनिक क्रिया, तो फिलोसोफाइजिंग इज एन एक्टिविटी, और निश्चित ही फिलॉसफी में जब भी हम बात करते हैं तो 3 परिप्रेक्ष्य महत्वपूर्ण हो जाते हैं। एक परिप्रेक्ष्य है मेटाफिजिकल, तत्व मीमांसीय, दूसरा है ज्ञान मीमांसीय, और तीसरा तो मेटाफिजिकल, एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल एंड एक्सियोलॉजिकल, मूल्य मीमांसा जिसको कहते हैं या एथिक्स कहें। तो यहाँ जब हम नरेटिव्स ऑफ मीमांसा पंचकम, चूंकि एक टाइटल देना होता है किसी भी आख्यान का या किसी भी पेपर का, तो द टाइटल विच आई वांटेड टू फॉर्मुलेट वो है कि नरेटिव्स ऑफ मीमांसा मनीषा पंचकम। तो यहाँ पर बैकग्राउंड इसका, जैसे हमने बताया कि ईशावास्य उपनिषद का ही बैकग्राउंड है मनीषा पंचकम का, और ईशावास्य उपनिषद और मनीषा पंचकम दोनों को लेकर आपके सामने चंद बातों को मैं रखना चाहूँगा, चूँकि मुझे समय 10-15 मिनट तो जरूर, रेखा जी। अब किसी भी आख्यान, वाद, संवाद और आख्यान भारतीय दर्शन के परिप्रेक्ष्य में, तो कोई भी आख्यान अगर हम करते हैं तो वहाँ पर कोई न कोई संवाद भी होना चाहिए, विवाद भी होना चाहिए, वाद भी होना चाहिए, लेकिन मैसेज, आख्यान नरेटिव्स हैज गॉट इट्स ओन मैसेज। विदाउट मैसेज द नरेटिव कैन नॉट बी कंप्लीट। क्योंकि अब मैसेज क्या है, what is the message of the narrative of the Mimamsa Manisha Panchakam? The message is very loud and very clear, और वो मैसेज है कि समाज में जो असमानता है, जो समाज में विषमता है, इनइक्वालिटी, और जो समाज में विभेदीकरण है, सामाजिक स्तरीकरण के संदर्भ में ऐसा माना जाता है कि शंकराचार्य सिर्फ मेटाफिजिशियन हैं, शंकराचार्य एब्सोल्यूटिस्ट हैं, शंकराचार्य ने जीवन और जगत को नकार दिया है, ऐसे आक्षेप लगते हैं। और विद्यार्थियों के लिए, शिक्षक तो सभी जानते हैं, और हमारे सामने शुक्ला जी हैं, तो निश्चित ही अल्बर्ट श्वाइजर, उनकी किताब में भी मेंशन है। अल्बर्ट श्वाइजर की एक पतली सी किताब है, इंडियन थॉट्स एंड इट्स डेवलपमेंट, दैट इज मस्ट फॉर स्टूडेंट्स, यू शुड रीड इट, कि what are the charges against क्लासिकल और इंडियन फिलॉसफी, और उस चार्जेस को किस तरह से हम रिफ्यूट करेंगे, वो भी एक फिलोसोफाइजिंग का एक मेथोडोलॉजी ये है कि आप जो चार्जेस लगते हैं, तो अल्बर्ट श्वाइजर ने एक आक्षेप लगाया, भारतीय दर्शन जीवन और जगत को नकारता है। क्या शुक्ला जी, आपके किताब में जिसको कि आईसीपीआर में संयोग से मुझे अप्रूव करने का मौका मिला, पब्लिश भी हो गया, तो उसमें शंकराचार्य के मनीषा पंचकम को यदि हम लेते हैं और ईशावास्य उपनिषद को लेते हैं, तो यह अल्बर्ट श्वाइजर का जो आक्षेप है, वह आक्षेप निर्मूल, निराधार, और कहीं भी इस आक्षेप में कोई तत्व नहीं मिलता है, क्योंकि ईशावास्य उपनिषद में भी ईशावास्य उपनिषद के 2 मंत्रों को, श्लोक हम नहीं कह सकते, गलती से भी हम इसको मंत्र ही मानते हैं। वेद और उपनिषद में मंत्र हैं, श्लोक तो कालिदास के ग्रंथों में है, शकुंतलम में श्लोक है, लेकिन उपनिषद मनीषा पंचकम में या ईशावास्य उपनिषद में वो मंत्र है। तो पहला ही मंत्र उसका इतना गंभीर है, जिसमें ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत् किंच जगत्याम जगत तेन तक्तेन भुंजिता मां गृध कस्योद्धनम, कोवेट नॉट द पोजेशन ऑफ द अदर्स। ईशावास्य का पहला मंत्र है, पहला मैसेज है, कोवेट नॉट द पोजेशन ऑफ द अदर्स। दूसरे के धन ही कह सकते हैं, धन के प्रति कोई भी आसक्ति या लोलुपता नहीं होनी चाहिए। यह कितना बड़ा जीवन और जगत को नकारने वाला एक मूल्यात्मक अभिव्यक्ति है कि तेन तक्तेन भुंजिता। We have to renounce if we want to live a happy life, if we want to live a good life, क्योंकि मनुष्य का जीने का एक उद्देश्य है कि वह अच्छे जीवन को व्यतीत करे। अगर आपको अच्छे जीवन की जरूरत है तो ईशावास्य उपनिषद के इस मंत्र को आप अपने जीवन में धारण करें कि हमें त्याग की भावना होनी चाहिए, हमें दूसरे के पोजेशंस को, दूसरे के धन को, संपत्ति को की ओर लालच की दृष्टि से नहीं देखना चाहिए। यह एक बहुत बड़ा मैसेज है ईशावास्य उपनिषद का। और मनीषा पंचकम में ये जो सोशल स्ट्रक्चर है उसमें विषमता मनीषा पंचकम में है कि कोयम विभेद भ्रम, ये विभेद समाज में जो सामाजिक स्तरीकरण है, वर्गीकरण है, ब्राह्मण, क्षत्रिय, वैश्य और शूद्र, तो शंकराचार्य कहते हैं कि चूंकि हम एकात्म दर्शन की बात करते हैं, इसलिए कोई इस वर्गीकरण क्षत्रिय, वैश्य, शूद्र ये जो क्लासिफिकेशन है उसके कारण, क्लासिफिकेशन के कारण जो विषमता है उस पर उनका आघात है शंकराचार्य का, कि हम इस, चूंकि ये घटना शैलेंद्र तो है नहीं, तो एक घटना काशी का कि शंकराचार्य दशाश्वमेध घाट से स्नान कर जब निकले और शिव के दर्शन के लिए जा रहे थे, तो रास्ते में एक भंगी वो झाड़ू लगा रहा था। तो शंकराचार्य एक उत्कृष्ट व्यक्तित्व के धनी सन्यासी, वो तो उनसे अपेक्षा नहीं की जा सकती है कि वो कहे होंगे, लेकिन उनके साथ जो शिष्य थे उन लोगों ने कहा कि भागो भागो, गेट अवे गेट अवे। तो ये भागो भागो, तो उस भंगी ने, उस शूद्र ने, चांडाल शब्द का इस्तेमाल शास्त्र में किया गया है। तो वो उस चांडाल ने पूछा कि किसको भागने के लिए कह रहे हैं, किसको जाने के लिए कह रहे हैं, क्या आत्मा को या शरीर को, किसको? क्योंकि आत्मा और शरीर तो वेदांत के अनुसार में भिन्नता नहीं है। तो शंकराचार्य को ऐसा महसूस हुआ कि सचमुच में अद्वैत का अर्थ हमें बनारस की गलियों में ही पता चला कि अद्वैत का क्या अर्थ है, और उस भंगी के उस प्रश्न से पता चला। तो ये मनीषा पंचकम का एक बहुत ही स्ट्रॉन्ग मैसेज है, क्योंकि नरेटिव्स विदाउट मैसेज इज नॉट ए नरेटिव एट ऑल। कोई ना कोई मैसेज होना चाहिए ना। तो ये उपनिषद जो क्लासिकल इंडियन फिलॉसफी का जो आधार है उपनिषद, और शंकराचार्य is the most dominant philosopher not in India but in the entire universe. शंकराचार्य एक बहुत ही मौलिक और बहुत ही श्रेष्ठ दार्शनिक हम मानते रहे हैं, और भारतीय परिप्रेक्ष्य में अगर एक नाम लेना होगा तो शंकराचार्य का ही नाम हम लेना चाहेंगे। तो उनके वो ये जो वेरी छोटी सी पुस्तक है, और ईशावास्य उपनिषद भी 18 मंत्रों का उपनिषद है, और इस उपनिषद में और मनीषा पंचकम में दोनों का मैसेज है कि समाज में जो विषमता है वर्ण के आधार पर, जाति के आधार पर, और उस विषमता को भारतीय दार्शनिक के परिप्रेक्ष्य में, भारतीय प्राचीन दर्शन के परिप्रेक्ष्य में अगर हम देखते हैं तो ऐसा किसी ने इस विभेद को नहीं माना है। और जो सोशल स्ट्रक्चर है दैट इज फॉर द फंक्शनिंग ऑफ द सोसाइटी, नॉट फॉर द डिस्क्रिमिनेशन। यद्यपि कि ऐसा हम देखते हैं कि discrimination is very much prevailing in the society, but our philosophers, our Upanishad, Ved, they do not subscribe to the inequality and discrimination. तो इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ, that's why the narrative of the Indian philosophy to the society, message to the society is very strong, and we believe in the equality of the human beings, not only of the human beings, but Hinduism believes in the equality of the living beings. Respect to the living beings, that is also the message of the Hinduism. So with these words, I thank the organizers that you have given me a chance, and I also thank the chairperson, कंचन सक्सेना जी ICPR की डायरेक्टर भी थी। उस समय मैं फेलो था, और आज भी मैं उनको सम्मान के साथ देखता रहा हूँ। लखनऊ में कई बार आपसे भेंट भी होती रही है। तो इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ रेखा जी को धन्यवाद देते हुए, और अपने मित्रों को जो बैठे हैं हमारे पड़ोसी मित्र हैं किस्मत सिंह, डॉक्टर किस्मत सिंह जी, और अखिल भारतीय दर्शन परिषद के वो पत्रिका है, तो उसमें कुछ लोग होता है कि स्ट्रॉन्ग टीम होने से कुछ काम होता है। तो किस्मत जी हमारे उस पत्रिका के संपादक मंडल की एक रीढ़ की हड्डी की तरह हैं। जब चाहते हैं, जब भी होता है, जब भी हमको ज़रूरत होती है तो मैं बुलाता हूँ, आप आते हैं। और श्यामल जी हैं, तो निश्चित ही श्यामल जी बिहार दर्शन परिषद के सचिव भी हैं, और संयोग से मेरा भी भाग्य रहा है कि मुझे भी पढ़ाने का मौका बड़े अच्छे अच्छे लोगों को मिला। और निश्चित ही बिहार में दर्शन को जीवित रखा है। तो आज इस मंच के माध्यम से ये बताने में मुझे हर्ष हो रहा है कि ये हमारे विद्यार्थी रहे हैं, और शैलेंद्र तो हैं नहीं, विद्यार्थी तो नहीं थे, लेकिन विद्यार्थी से भी ज़्यादा नज़दीक हो रहे हैं। जब वो पढ़ते थे उस समय से मेरे संपर्क में रहे हैं। और दुबे जी चूँकि हमारे मित्र प्रोफेसर एसपी दुबे के भतीजा बिहार में जो कहते हैं तो रहे हैं, इसलिए कभी भी ऐसा अवसर नहीं आया कि दुबे जी के बारे में जब भी कोई बात हो तो कोई भी गलत या उल्टी पलटी बात हम लोगों ने कभी नहीं कहा है। न एसपी दुबे जैसे उनको देखते थे वैसे ही हम भी देखते हैं। हालांकि उनका दायित्व है सचिव का, तो उसमें बहुत सारी गलतियां भी होती हैं, बहुत सारे अच्छे भी काम होते हैं। तो आप बैठे हुए हैं, और भी सूर्य प्रकाश पांडे जी हैं, मुकेश श्रीवास्तव, मुकेश चौरसिया हैं, बहुत सारे नाम। चूँकि मुझे मेरी आदत भी है कि लोगों को व्यक्तिगत रूप से जाने, भाषण भले ना दें अच्छी, लेकिन आदमी को ठीक से जाने, ये मेरा जरूर प्रयास रहता है। इन्हीं सब शुक्ला जी हैं।
थैंक यू सो मच सर। सर हम लोगों के गार्जियन हैं, गुरु हैं, बहुत सम्मानित और विद्वान व्यक्ति हैं। सर को सुनना हम लोगों के लिए बहुत ही गर्व की बात है। सर इतना कुछ भी प्रोग्राम होता है दर्शन शास्त्र से, दर्शन विषय में, तो सर कहीं से भी आ जाते हैं। हम लोग डिपार्टमेंट में भी किए थे तो थोड़े देर के लिए सर आ गए और हम लोग को आशीर्वाद दिए थे। तो सर बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद यहाँ पे आके, और आप अपने भाषण के द्वारा हम लोगों को इतना अनुग्रहित किए हैं। हम लोग धन्य हो गए हैं आपके भाषण से सुन के। आपका जो डिबेट और डायलॉग्स पे और नैरेटिव्स पे जो आख्यान है उससे हम लोगों ने सुना, तो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर। अब मैं नेक्स्ट चेयरपर्सन नटराजू आदर्श सुपली जी को आमंत्रित करती हूँ को आए और मंच शेयर करें। चेयरपर्सन नटराज सर मर्ज कर दिया गया है, यहीं से दोनों सेशन चला लेंगे हम लोग।
आ जाइए नटराज,
आ जाइए सर।
आप विशिष्ट अतिथि हैं सर, यू आर स्पेशल गेस्ट ऑफ द सेशन।
हम सोचते थे कि आप नीचे जाने आए।
नहीं नहीं नहीं, यू आर द स्पेशल गेस्ट सर, इट्स अवर प्रिविलेज।
थैंक यू सर। अब क्योंकि हमारा टाइम थोड़ा लेट चल रहा है तो बिना स्पीकर का लिस्ट स्पीकर को बुला लिया। हाँ बस यही मैं सोच रही थी, स्पीकर को बुला ली थी, बोलने ही जा रही थी मैं। ठीक है जी। स्पीकर्स जो हैं अभी हमारे, फर्स्ट स्पीकर है डॉक्टर रेखा ओझा मैम, सेकेंड है प्रोफेसर रत्ना अमृत, थर्ड है डॉक्टर मौसमी रॉय एंड डॉक्टर संजय मंडल, डॉक्टर सूर्य प्रकाश पांडे। और इसी में जो हम लोगों ने सेशन को मर्ज कर दिया, कल इवनिंग में एक्चुअली लेट हो गया था, तो उस सेशन को इधर मर्ज कर रहे हैं। तो उसमें जो हमारे स्पीकर हैं वो है,
मैं देखता हूँ,
डॉक्टर हरि नारायणन वी, डॉक्टर मुनमुन चक्रवर्ती,
उनको
डॉक्टर
complete कर
सिंधु
लेते हैं।
पौडवाल,
तो कल से वेट
डॉक्टर सुरभि वर्मा एंड सुगाता घोष, ये हमारे स्पीकर हैं।
Thank you and welcome to the technical session, everybody. Namaskar. As we had to skip a session yesterday afternoon, evening session, we couldn't do it, so we'll start with them with a shortened time spans. And I will calculate by the time the first speaker speaks. Professor Harnarayanji, please come over. We'll start with the yesterday's postponed session, and then we'll take over. And we will wind it up as, yeah, please put it on and then.
आप आ जाओ मैम, आप
ठीक है,
मैम आ जाएगी स्पीकर, बुला लीजिए, ठीक है, उनको बुला लीजिए आप।
मुझे लिस्ट दीजिए, मैं मैनेज कर लूंगा। मुझे दीजिए, खरीद। We will go with the second speaker. By the time this is settled, please, Dr. Munmoon Chakrabarti. Dr. Munmoon.
Respected Chairperson Sir, Professor Nataraju Sir, dignitaries on the dais, of the dais, learned speakers, scholars, students of the Department of Philosophy, Magad University. Namaste and good morning to everyone.
Anything
title-
around 16 to 18 minutes. Yeah, and then couple of minutes for, please.
Yeah, myself, Dr. Munmun Chakrabarti, Department of Philosophy, Assam University. And the title of my paper is Dialogue and Debate in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. From the title itself, I guess many of you can guess that it is related to the very famous dialogue that we know that has been portrayed in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad between Yagnavalkya and Gargi. But I have here two very specific objectives in my paper. First is that I tried to argue that dialogue and debate that we see in the Upanishads, these are not ordinary dialogue or debate. Rather, they are used as a methodology to establish the teachings of the Upanishad on logical ground. Because as we know, the sutras of the Upanishads are very concise, indefinite, ineffable, and it's really tough to get the inner meaning of those sutras. And as a result, though we also know that Upanishads are, of course, the fundamental basis of Indian philosophy, and but these are all a pre-theoretic text. I mean, we don't see any systematic effort to develop any theory. There is, the Upanishadic seers, somehow they didn't give that much of stress in articulating the problems in a systematic way. Of course, there are important philosophical concepts, subtle, very important metaphysical concepts which are discussed. but the theorization part is not prominent. And as a result, they used debate and dialogue as a methodology to establish their teachings. In general, we see the Upanishadic teachings that includes both Upadesha and Upapatti. Upadeshas are direct, precise declaration of truth, but it is the Upapatti section that try to establish the teachings on a logical ground. And it is that Upapatti that reflects the philosophical spirit of Upanishad. Now, when we see the structure of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we know there are three kandas, Madhukanda, Munikanda, and Khilakanda. Now, Madhukanda is more about the teachings, the central teachings about the identity of self, Brahman, and all. But it is in the Munikanda that we see that all those dialogues that evolved between, say, Yagnavalkya, King Janaka, Maitri, and Gargi. And through this dialogue, they try to brought out actually the logical essence of those teachings, and that is Supapatti. Now, this is the first argument. And the second point is that I try to do, of course, I try to discuss the dialogue between Yagnavalkya and Gargi, but my attempt was to make a kind of comparison and assessment between two very important episodes of dialogue where two female characters are involved. One is Maitri and the other one is Gargi. And interesting fact is they come from two different social backgrounds. One is a housewife and the other one is a very well-known, well-established scholar. But it is their participation that make the debate very, very challenging and highly philosophical. So, of course, Yagnavalkya is also involved because it is with Yagnavalkya only we see that dialogue started. But his role is very interesting, and I find it very fascinating because his will for his openness towards having conversation with people who come from different social background, that is also something very, very significant. He never tried to hide the truth or never even tried to misguide his interlocutor. Rather, his approach was very transparent and genuine throughout the conversation. Now, having said that, let me focus on the first episode, that is Yagnavalkya and Maitri Sangvad. We know that we see in the fourth chapter of second Kanda, and the scene begins when Yagnavalkya decided to live the worldly life and decided to distribute all his property between his two wives. Katyani, we know that story. Accepted. She raised no objection, but the curious and perceptive wife, Maitri, she raised objection and asked her husband for the clarification that whether all this wealth, everything, whether it can give her the ultimate happiness or immortality or not. Now, we know that Yagnavalkya denied, but he was pleased by the curiosity of the kind of curiosity that Maitri has shown there. And being convinced by her mental fitness, he started to convey the highest teachings to her. Now, the unique feature of this dialogue is the method of teaching that Yagnavalkya has adopted throughout the conversation. Instead of imposing any abstract ideas or any subtle concepts, he started with something that is very simple, very practical, and something given to our experience in an ordinary way. So Yagnavalkya teaches her how one has to move from the realm of known to the unknown, from the realm of seen to the unseen, from macro to the micro level. Maitri was confused by this kind of explanation and discussion, but that shows the incomprehensible nature of the subject. Yagnavalkya, being aware of this, he never tried to, disappoint her. Rather, he offers several such examples that can help her to grasp the true essence of the subject. So when Maitri raised the objection or the question that where is Brahman, I don't see it, Yagnavalkya gave her very simple, very practical example, saying that the nature of Brahman is non-objective, something we cannot cognize it, and it is not like any a tree, a pot that you can point out, but its existence cannot be denied. So he gave the example of salty water, where salt cannot be seen, but you cannot deny the presence of salt. Now, what we see that the purpose of this kind of Upanishadic dialogue is not just to impart knowledge, but that at the same time, it encourages a kind of systematic, coherent, and critical learning, experiential learning, and a kind of transformation of our mental state, antakarana, through reflection as well as realization. Because knowledge arises only when one is open, free, and receptive in spirit. Now, beside this dialogue, we see Upanishad also encourages open philosophical debate for philosophical development growth. The same Brihadaranyaka Upanishad here records another interesting dialogue that evolved between Yagnavalkya and Gargi, and that took place in the court of King Janaka, who once, we know the story, announced huge amount of wealth, who can prove himself, or the one who can prove himself or herself as the best scholar in the assembly. And it is in this context an inspiring and highly philosophical discussion evolves between Yagnavalkya and Gargi Vachikavanambi. Gargi was then already one established, well-known scholar of King Janaka's court. And this is not an ordinary conversation, the one we have discussed between Yagnavalkya and Maitri. Rather, it was a very argumentative discourse, a kind of perhaps a jalpa. Now, the debate begins when Yagnavalkya asks his disciple to collect all the, reward or wealth, whatever the king announced. And in that way, he indirectly assumed that he is the most learned person in that assembly, and so he has the right to have all this. Now, this act of Yagnavalkya provokes the other seekers and saints, and as a result, many of the scholars of those assembly, they stood up and raised their voices. Now, against this daring attitude of Yagnavalkya, starting with Ashavala, then Arthabhaga, and many other. But surprisingly, Yagnavalkya answered all their queries and defeated them. And I think this point is very important to note, because yesterday when Professor Mishraji was telling about the Yagnavalkya and Gargi dialogue, that the kind of pseudo-narrative we often get, that the dialogue happened between Yagnavalkya and Gargi, and Yagnavalkya somehow didn't allow Gargi to speak. But this is not the case, because we have to see that the thing that happened before this dialogue happened between Yagnavalkya and Gargi. Before that, already Yagnavalkya defeated the other scholar, and then Gargi raised her voice and started challenging him, started raising all some subtle, difficult questions. In fact, those questions are so complicated or so subtle that at one point of time, Yagnavalka herself asks Gargi to stop, and Gargi admits. But then again, the important point to note here is that Gargi came back and again raised the objection or two questions, very specific questions with the permission of the court, and Yagnavalka has answered them satisfactorily. Now, what is important to note that Gargi was not only pleased and mesmerized by the response, but she asked the entire assembly to acknowledge Yagnavalka as the base scholar of that assembly and asked them to acknowledge his unparalleled scholarship. Now, we can see that the two episodes of dialogue, one that happened between Yagnavalka and Maitri and the other one between Yagnavalka and Gargi, they are not similar in pattern and they have different implications. In case of the former, we see a kind of compassionate association between the two speakers where one is, no one is trying to challenge the other, but both of them are trying to jointly making an effort to reach something, a goal, exploring its different dimension. Maitri was a sincere seeker and she never tried to challenge the wisdom or knowledge claim of Yagnavalka. And at the same time, Yagnavalka also didn't try to defeat her. Rather, he tried all his level best to convince him, to make her understand the point. And this kind of sambad is very prominent in other Upanishads also, whether we see in Katha Upanishad or Kena Upanishad, in different contexts between father and son, teacher and disciple, and even Yama and Nachiketa. Now, on the other hand, the later episode of dialogue that occurred between Yagnavalka and Gargi, that actually demonstrates the vigor and courage of the two speakers, where one challenges the position of the other. Gargi was not happy with the approach of Yagnavalka, and as a result, she tried to assess her again and again.
Sorry, but concluding remarks.
Yeah, just
please.
last final remark.
I'm not stopping like the Gargi was stopped. I believe the feminists would excuse me.
So, but Gargi aims to counter him and asks for some logical justification of his contention. Now, she cleverly asks the question that Yagnavalka refuses to answer because she was also a Brahmavadini and she was aware of the methodology. So, as a result, Yagnavalka immediately warns Gargi for disregarding the method of inquiry, regarding the nature of absolute truth, and also reminds her about the limits of inferential approach. So what we observe here that this kind of dialogue or debates, whatever have been portrayed in the Upanishad, they are not meant for the sake of dialogue only, but for the purpose of conveying the teachings or the messages of Upanishad on the basis of logical ground. And even if we consider the point of King Janaka when he announced the public debate, his intention was not to enjoy the debate, rather he tried to find out the best scholar from whom he can actually attain the Brahma Jnana. So I would conclude by saying that Upanishad encourages and appreciates critical thinking, questioning and learning through debates and discussion for every genuine seeker. And there is a sufficient room for logical inquiry in all this Upanishad, because philosophy in India is not just darshana, it is also anvishiki that endorses logical thinking and coherent inquiry. Thank you, sir, for giving me this
Thank you, Dr. Moon Chakrabarti, and that was a good job given the shortness of time. We take one question, if at all, if anybody would like to inquire anything on the Brihadaranyaka? Any feminist readings are there on the debate? I will take one, sir. Supposed to be the toughest of the Upanishads, the largest of all. With that wonderful question from the Maitreyi, Kasminnu Bhagavo Vignate, Sarvamidam Vignatam Bhavati. What is it that by knowing which everything else is it has become a classic. The question has become a classic. Sir, you had a question. Please, one question we'll take. Crisp and straight the question, sir. Sir, is it Shruti or Smruti? Shruti. Is Shruti logical? In a sense, does it prescribe the logical process to reach the ultimate?
That's what I tried to present in my discussion, that yes, it is there, but not in a systematic way. But they adopt a methodology, and I consider that it is the method of dialogue or debates or sometimes narratives, that these are the method through which they try to, of course, establish that. That's why I say the teachings of the Upanishad includes both Upadesha and Upapatti. That is the logical essence of Shruti.
If you had in mind the limits of logic and reason as far as Brahman inquiry is concerned, then we have to go with the Shankara Bhashya, Shastravakya Sahayatvena Tarkasya Abhyupetatvat on Brahma Sutra, first sutra. So there is actually a balancing done between logical reasoning and then Shabda Pramana. That has been achieved very well by Acharya Shankara. I mean, what he has in mind is what kind of limits that we see for the logical process when it comes to Brahman inquiry. Please, we'll take, this is the last.
When we are using in the Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, whether they are accepting all those methods of Nyaya philosophy, this is the similar questions that we can ask to other methods also. Whether they have accepted throughout all the methods of Nyaya philosophy as whether or not.
I have actually, thank you for this question, madam. I have not noticed that, but at least what I understood by Jalpa, I thought that the kind of dialogue we see, that's why I try to compare it with two episodes of dialogue. One is between Maitri and Yagnavalkya, and then I came to Yagnavalkya and Gargi, because the kind of dialogue we see between Maitri and Yagnavalkya, that is a Sangvad, not even Vivad. A dialogue, a very compassionate kind of engagement, a constructive interaction. But when we come to the second episode of Gargi and Yagnavalkya, that was not their goal or their objective. Rather, they try to contest the position of other. So that's why I consider that it perhaps the Jalpa kind of debate that we see in this context. But regarding other types like Vitanda and all, I have not seen that kind of thing in case of Upanishad, actually. Thank you, madam.
So there we end. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much. That
Thank
was do we have the slides ready, Professor? Please come on. Dr. Harinarayan ji from IIT Jodhpur, is that? Yeah, it is.
Okay, respected people on the dais and everybody else, good morning, and thank you, the organizers, for arranging this event in this holy place. Okay, so the title is Dialogue as Philosophical Inquiry. Hope I am audible?
Yes.
Okay, dialogue is put in quotes. Actually, basically, it refers to the method of dialogue that the physicist and philosopher David Bohm exposed. That's what I'm referring to by dialogue here. It will become clear. Okay, no, somebody is operating it? Yeah, please go to the next slide. It's already there. Yeah. So this is a quote from Devi Prasad Chattopadhyaya about the importance of respecting Purva Paksha in his book, What is Living and Dead in Indian Philosophy. I don't think it requires any explanation. So, I mean, all of you would know all of this much better than me, so it will be presumptuous on my part to explain all this actually. And yesterday, Professor Nadaraju eloquently explained that we often fail in doing justice to Purvapaksha. I think that was the main position or the contention that he made. So my attempt here can be understood as an effort to explain why is it the case that we often fail to do justice to Purvapaksha, which in turn can shed some light on the ways to mitigate that or to reduce that injustice that we often perform on that front actually. Yeah, there may be one more line here. Is it animation might be working? One more line is there, I think. No, there's no line. No, go to the next. Yeah. So recently, I picked up this recently, our one young philosopher working in Pune University. What is his name? Muzaffar Ali. Muzaffar Ali. He has published a paper in the journal Sophia, where he argues that the method of dialogue, that of doing justice to Purvapaksha, that methodological rigor that Indian philosophy expects, is something that can provide the much needed ethical footing for a proper ethical outlook or even an ethical theory. He explains it in the context of whether there is a proper ethical theory in India or not. That's a different context. I am not discussing that. That is hugely debatable. I agree with that. So I refrain from talking about that. But the point here is that whatever is that is required to ensure that we end up providing adequate justice to Purvapaksha, that can make us more ethical in our outlook and effort. So there is indeed a connection between all these two things actually, for which the method of dialogue is useful, very much useful, which in turn can be explained. Why is it useful? On the basis of some accounts of attention. That is what I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes or so. Actually. Yeah. So this is Muzaffar Ali, again, the point that I have already explained, the point that Muzaffar Ali makes, that ethical theory, we can have a footing of ethical theory, the method of doing justice to Purvapaksha can provide the Buddha. So what he says is basically, whenever there is polarization, whether it is about religion, whether it is about our other habits, wherever there is polarization, if both sides are ready to listen to the Purvapaksha properly, to understand the Purvapaksha properly, doing justice to the Purvapaksha means there can be a common ground. So that is the beginning of a proper ethical engagement, according to him actually. So my point here is that the dialogue that David Bohm talks about can enrich that attempt actually. It will be one way actually. I'm not saying that is the only way or that is even essential. I'm not saying even it is necessary, but it may be sufficient. That is the only point I'm making. So dialogue in the Bohmian sense, the way David Bohm articulated, it basically means going through the meaning of the words. It's a matter of 20 people or 30 people sitting together and discussing not any particular topic. It can be anything, but ready to challenge any assumption, including the meaning of life or whether it is even essential to continue to life, anything. You're open to challenge that. That means some kind of a presuppositionless inquiry, but in a group setting actually. So that is what is written there actually, flow of knowing, and nobody tries to win or dominate actually, that's important. Nobody, there is no agenda, whether it is winning, dominating, nobody is giving their own, trying to impose their view, nothing is there actually. Common participation, that's the theme, we will explain that theme actually. Yeah, please. So it goes into the, so it has got an impact. Dialogue, Bohm used to conduct such dialogues actually, and according to him, his experience he has explained in a book on dialogue. So what he says is that this goes into the whole thought process and tries to change it collectively. And many of you may know that Bohm used to collaborate with Jiddu Krishnamurti also, so they have some books together. So while engaging in thought, we do not pay attention to the process. So many of the points that is being said can appear quite similar to mindfulness also, because it's basically the ability to look into thought as they are, or some people put it as separating awareness from thinking, not to be identified with the thinking, that ability to dispassionately look into thought, just like you are able or you can look at any object. So basically it's something similar only, but done in a group setting, in an informal or a different setting. That is the only point actually. And fragmentation originates in thought. Thought is something that separates things actually. We will explain this point on the basis of theory of attention. So that will make it more clear why are we saying all these things. And the world is shades merging into one, but we select. So thought has got that property of focusing, narrowing our attention on one thing and overlooking the ground, overlooking the background or the rest of the things actually. Salience in attention. We'll come to that actually. Yeah, please go to the next. Yeah. So the method of dialogue is supposed to help us. According to him, it will help us to see what is there in another's mind without reaching any conclusion. So the point that I'm trying to make is that this ability is something that we can help us, that can help us to do justice to the Purva Paksha, because you are in a state where you are not in a hurry to reach any conclusion. You are open to whatever is there. That is a prerequisite. That may be the prerequisite to ensure that we do justice to Purva Paksha. That is what eventually I want to argue for, actually. Yeah, you can go to the next. So according to Bohm, thought can itself become proprioceptive. Proprioception is basically the ability of the body to perceive itself. Our balance and everything is dependent upon proprioception. So when thought also becomes proprioceptive, basically means whenever thought comes, you are aware of its existence without getting identified. I mean, this point will be familiar to many of you because this is the land of mindfulness. So I don't think I need to explain it. So, and this in turn can give rise to participatory consciousness. That's also an important point. Why is it the case that Bohm emphasized a group setting is that, according to him, that is one way to give rise to participatory consciousness. So there is a difference between partake in and partake of. We may partake in, that's quite normal. I mean, normal for us or something that we ordinarily understand. But to partake of means realizing ourselves as parts of the whole, actually. That is something that we normally miss in our culture. It will become more clear when we come to the attention point, actually. Yeah, we're going to go to the next. So literal thought is dominant. This is also another point that he make, actually. So again, the point is that when we talk about literal thought dominance and all these things, that is mainly applicable to the Western culture. So Oriental cultures used to be different, actually. That point also will become clear. But nowadays, it is explicit that everybody is getting submerged into that way of thinking, actually, that literal thought. Literal thought is basically a matter of partake in, actually. That means there is a separation between the subject and the object and the world. So the sense of partake of is missing in the case of literal thought, actually. So literal thought is something needed for some activity. This is basically a case of narrow attention. It will become clear. For certain purpose, it is required, but only for that, actually. But in our culture, what happened is that that has become the default. That is the point, actually. Yeah. This can be understood in terms of narrow and broad attention. Attention is not inherently restricted, but this restriction comes due to our habits or cultural things, actually. So attention, the importance of attention is something all of us recognize, and our Jonathan Ganeri has even written a book, Attention Not Self. So importance of attention is recognized, but what we normally do not realize is that different types of attention, the narrow and broad attention, and the impact of it on our understanding of ourselves, and which in turn is a matter of understanding other also, because they are two sides of the same coin, the way you understand yourself and the way you understand the other. That will become clear when we look into the different types of attention. So evolutionarily speaking, how much time is there? 5 minutes? Or? No, good enough. I can speak even faster. But anyway, now there is a... Anyway, since it is split, I think there may not be very, very pressing. It may not be very pressing. Okay, yeah. So two types of attention is there. Evolutionarily speaking, there are two types of attention. One is narrow attention, focusing on one particular thing, like this thing, what thing. So look at the bird, actually. The bird has to narrowly focus on the food, actually. At the same time, it has to be vigilant. It has to be open to whatever is there, actually. So that is the difference between narrow attention and broad or open attention. Success of life is, simply put, ability to eat without being eaten, isn't it? And to eat, you need to be narrow. And to ensure that you are not eaten by somebody else, you need to be vigilant, that broad attention. Anywhere a threat is coming, anywhere. So that is what the picture symbolizes, actually. So evolutionarily, it is required, and almost all animals have these types of attention, which in turn is observed by the two hemispheres. In fact, the very requirement of there being two hemispheres, many people say that because you need two types of attention. So left hemisphere is largely towards narrow attention, and right one is largely towards broad attention. This is something that neurologists, everybody accepts, actually. So whenever there's a talk about left and right, it may go into the pop neuroscience, thinking that no, right is a matter of emotion, left is logical. That's not what we are talking about. There is something different, actually. But the only point is that the way information is dealt with, the way information is handled, that is basically a matter of attention. There is a huge difference between left and right hemisphere. Both of them give rise to two phenomenological worlds. That is what some people say, actually. So many of the distinctions that were there historically in philosophy, like Apollonian and Dionysian and whatever Bergson talked about, many people have talked about, all of them largely or broadly, roughly correspond to this left hemispheric and right hemispheric with attention. No, please go back to the previous one, actually. Yeah. Slightly, yeah. So this is the importance of precision and comprehensiveness. Precision is a matter of narrow attention, and comprehensiveness is a matter of broad attention. So world is something to be manipulated. That is the narrow way of putting it. For the bird has to eat it. Eating is basically a matter of manipulation. So that is required. Nobody is questioning that. But at the same time, the bird is able to view itself as a part of a broader context. That is the broad attention. So what happens is that in our culture, when it comes to human beings, narrow attention is basically verbal attention. That is the linguistic mode of attention. Nowadays we say that language is everywhere, isn't it? Language is everywhere. So that verbal attention or linguistic mode of attention, that has become excessively dominant. And in fact, one of the famous works written on the topic by Ian McGilchrist, even the title is that, The Master and His Emissary, Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World. So the Western world is made on the basis of excessive attention. You can only say excessive. It's not 100% or anything. But the verbal attention, the narrow attention has become excessively dominant. And that in turn, obviously has given rise to spectacular developments in so-called technology and material life and all these things. At the same time, all of us know that with the simple inability to viscerally realize that we are part of the larger whole. That is an obvious fact, actually. So whatever catastrophe that we may encounter because of this, what is called the techno-industrial onslaught on nature, can be largely attributed to the imbalance that exists, actually. Imbalance is there. So these are two ways of being in the world. So whatever is there on the left is a matter of left hemispheric, and whatever is there on the right is right hemispheric, actually. So if you quickly go through it, I don't want to explain everything. It will take a lot of time, actually. So left hemispheric, whenever it is dominated, it is oriented to the familiar prefers virtual world. So virtual here also refers to the linguistic world, the world of thoughts, because it's a matter of not being directly connected to the world without representation. For example, if I am touching this mobile phone, there are two ways of touching it. One is that feeling of the touch. That is something in the right hemispheric. Whereas if I am using it, I'm basically manipulating, isn't it? I'm looking this as a tool. That is basically left hemispheric, actually. So by and large, when left hemispheric attention is dominant, the whole world is seen as a tool. So we have no problem in thinking the whole planet as a heap of resource, because it is something that for us to manipulate. So that way of looking at the world at large is possible because left hemispheric attention has become dominant. We can say in Western culture, but now we are also into that, actually. There is no doubt in that, actually. But of course, there can be some difference, and there are possibilities of challenging it in our kind of places. So there are basically refers to the certain thing is conviction. So the point whole talk about Purvapaksha. Why is it the case that we fail to do justice to Purvapaksha is that if we are dominated by the left side of thinking, obviously we will not have the patience even to understand the Purvapaksha, because certainty in conviction, that is the thing, actually. So Bertrand Russell used to say, actually, isn't it? The trouble with the world is that fools are overconfident and the intelligent full of doubt. So if you are dominated by left hemisphere, you will be convinced, actually. So another thing is that the instrumental approach. Yesterday, Professor Nadaraju talked about truth being given importance, or what is it, defeat being given importance. I would still say that truth has to be given importance even if you are trying to defeat somebody. Defeating may be required. I'm not denying that. The point that he made, that we should not be submissive. Obviously, we should not be submissive. But our aggressiveness or our attempt to show that the opponent is wrong cannot be based on our committing any falsehood, actually. To ensure that truth is our primary, focus, we need that right hemispheric ability to accept uncertainty. So right hemisphere is, somebody said that the overall timber is uncertain and sober, actually. So it's not interested in getting convinced. It's not in a hurry to be convinced or anything like that. It is open to all possibilities. So that attitude is something difficult if the left hemisphere is dominant, actually. So that is a point, actually. So for example, even if you look into whatever we do, actually, in a culture of what is, VC is not here, so I can freely tell, publish or perish culture. So when that happens, obviously, even if you misunderstand your Purvapaksha, if you are able to show that there is some novelty, you will get a publication, isn't it? So what is wrong with misunderstanding Purvapaksha? As long as you get something, so that ability, need to achieve or to defeat.
Sir, I am paying attention on time.
No, definitely. I can stop it. Yeah, I can stop it anytime. Yeah. So the point here is that as long as we are dominated by this left type of thinking, we may be less committed to the truth as such, and we will be more oriented towards achievement or defeating somebody. And as long as those things are dominant, we may not be able to do full justice to Purvapaksha, actually. So the method of dialogue, and obviously whether it is mindfulness or other thing, they're all useful in giving rise to that mental state where we can do justice to Purvapaksha. That's all, I think. Yeah. Can I Stop. Yeah. Yeah, enough, good enough.
Thank you so much. I mean, it was very fascinating. I mean, I wish you had more time and explained,
No, no, it's okay.
because it substantiates in a better way what all we were talking yesterday.
Yeah.
And it gives a very, it's a wonderful perspective. I mean, anyone has a question, yeah, please. Tripti ji. And somebody with the mic, yeah, please.
Very nice presentation.
Yeah, thank you,
Actually, a different kind of perspective you have used here. Actually, in different angles, whatever we are seeing something, then always we are seeing one object, and at the same time we are asking about myself also in any methods itself. When we are thinking about myself in yesterday, and I am thinking about myself in today, then always it is different. But because seeing is different in every day, we are developing ourselves as well as our thinking level. So in that perspective, I think all the worlds are varies from day to day. Every day this is varies. So in what aspect you have used partake in and partake of? So is there any relevance in that aspect to identify oneself, to understand a human being in a linguistic way, rather than to defeat that person when I am trying to establish my opinion towards any object? Then what would be my perspective on that way? I don't know you have understand my question.
I'm not very sure what you asked actually, but if it's a question about what is the difference between partaking in and partake of, is that a question?
Yes, in to
Yeah,
understanding myself itself.
Yeah, oneself, yeah. So basically what is being said is that when you are able to partake of, that means the ability to becomes the default. Ultimately, it's a matter of what is default. Both are there in everybody also. Different times it will come. It's a matter of defaulting into whatever our culture defaults into. Normally we say that individualistic culture and collectivist culture, isn't it? Maybe roughly similar to that only. So when narrow attention is dominant, there is a sharp difference between subject and object. Then the self obviously becomes one of a separative inner entity, separative, isolated sense of self becomes dominant, becomes a default, but not always. When you are watching a music, or when you are engaged in it, or when you are participating in a football match, then you are no longer that separate inner self actually. At that moment, you don't conceptualize in that way. So it changes, but the defaulting is to that. But when we are able to have that sense of partake of, that means the ability to see the whole, openness to the whole. And the whole is largely something that is not known to us. It is unknown. The whole cosmic whole is something that we do not really know. The only way to handle even the neti attitude is possible only with the right hemispheric way, because that's a matter of saying this is not this, something else. So you are open to more and more possibility, whatever is there. So that openness is possible only when right hemispheric thing is dominant. That is the master also. That's also another point. I don't know whether I'm answering. Perhaps I wanted to tell this. So the whole thing is that right hemispheric way has to be the master. The left one is only a servant or an emissary. But in our culture, the servant or the emissary has become the master, and the master is sidelined. That is the tragedy.
The conclusion is the leftist has to be sidelined.
No, not at all.
Is that my reading?
No.
No, I
Both
was
left and right are
because
left here. Actually.
Professor, what I picked is when there is attention and from the left hemisphere, you look at the things as instrumental and then you start manipulating.
Yeah.
The leftists manipulate.
No.
My conclusion is wrong. That's okay. I mean, David Bohm, Professor reminded of David Bohm. You can see a series of dialogues with J. Krishnamurti. And what I was trying to remember was the kind of attention that Bohm himself pays to Krishnaji's words. One can watch all those videos, a number of those are the best dialogues and the answers from J. Krishnamurti. Sir, we'll take one question more. Please, Bhavani. Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Hello. So the question is, you touched upon the individualistic and community living kind of an idea, and in some ways try to compare it with narrow focus and the wider focus, that your attention that you talked about. Now, do you see in the loss of community living is as a result of modernity has been there, and it has been observed in tribal cultures particularly, that particularly the considering nature as something outside yourself, it's not present in the tribal worldviews. So do you think it's that kind of a worldview that we should be aspiring to, or going back towards, or falling back to, or are you proposing something else?
I mean, you mean to say whether it's a matter of falling back to the indigenous way of life? I mean, is that what you're asking?
Right.
I mean, falling back, not in any negative sense, but falling back may appear to be negative, but the indigenous way of looking at ourselves as part of the whole, that is definitely not negative. That's certainly positive. My favorite example is that of the so-called organic food. Nowadays, we are all after organic food. But all these indigenous people used to have organic food without any effort, actually, isn't it? So, but we have missed it. I mean, we find it difficult to have it. Something similar is the case with mindfulness. Some people say that indigenous people are mindful, actually. They don't have to practice mindful. So, I wouldn't call it falling back, but I would call it as a matter of recognizing and overcoming our mistake, actually. So, yeah.
Say about this, do you see modernity particular coming into the scene and creating this problem that you're trying to point out to?
Yeah, it's a matter of modernity only, exclusive attention. Another way to understand it is, for example, the Nidham's puzzle is there, isn't it? Why is it the case that even though ancient China and India contributed a lot to science and technology, it's the West that dominated? That is the Nidham's puzzle. So one good response to that is that, yeah, they did it excessively. They exclusively focused on the so-called science and technology. That means narrowly focused on manipulating the world. So they developed, that's it. Whereas Indian and Chinese culture, we did not narrowly focus. That's why we did not go that way. Now, whether it is right or wrong, it's different. But
Thank you.
The balance is available in our culture. There's no
Thank you both, Bhavani and any students, MA or PhDs, you are the priority, Faculty keep on talking, that's okay. You are a priority for us, please. Yeah, that's one, sir. And then we'll, Sindhuji, please get ready. You have some slides or no? Please. Yeah.
Slide number 3.
Oh, very specific question. Good. Please ask the question. I mean, if he can relate, he knows. Please, go ahead.
Sir, you have classified two terms, precision and comprehension. So, is any possibility of union and union among them, precise comprehension? Because categorizing give a sense that both different things. But is any possibility? Because context also tell about precision and comprehension. Suppose I want to listen news, then I have to very precise 5 p.m. Then if I have to take lunch, then maybe 5 minutes. Okay, so thank you, sir.
No, definitely precision is required. That's why we said that narrow attention is required in certain contexts. When you are taking food, you need to be precise. I cannot eat the bottle, actually. I need to be precise that I take only water. Precision is required in certain contexts, but not always. If you try to be precise everywhere, then we are in trouble. That is the point, actually. So both are required, but comprehensiveness, the right hemispheric way, has to be the master. So how can we reclaim its masterhood? That is the challenge, actually. Yeah. I hope I answered.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. That was a good deliberation. Can we have Dr. Sindhu Paudyal, teaches at Tripura University, PhD from IIT Bombay, specialist in Indian and then Heideggerian and Levinas philosophies. Thank you. Please.
Namaskar. Thank you so much, Chair, respected dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, all the presenters and the resource persons of this seminar. So, my name is Dr. Sindhu Paudyal, as Professor Nataraju already stated, and I will be speaking on structural narrative of Raja Ram, of Ramcharitmanas, and the philosopher king of the Republic. So it is a little blended kind of thing that I try to deal here, The reason why, because philosopher king has always been a very center of attraction in the Western world. And at the same time, when we look around the Ram Rajya, then the first thing that comes to our mind is the king who has always taken the front seat, that is Raja Ram. And then specifically the reasons why I have taken Tulsi Ramayan, that is Ramcharitmanas, more than Valmiki Ramayana, because it is the king and also the devotional element which was prevalent in Tulsi Ramayan more than the Valmiki Ramayan. Because Valmiki Ramayan is more of a state of affair kind of thing. That is my interpretation. And then when I read Tulsi Ramayan, then I have seen that there is an element of making Ram as a hero, and at the same time making Ram as a god. And there is always a duality in understanding Ram as a god, godly figure, and then Ram as a king. So both taking place at the same time. However, which is not the case with the ideal state of Plato. But yet, the philosopher, what is the status of philosopher? What is this narrative around philosopher, which has been highlighted in the Republic, in at least in 3 books of Republic, 5th, 6th, and 7th. So which is that's the context of writing this paper. So I'll read out some of the passages to do justice to what I intended to say, instead of overwhelmed with my oratory. So let me just read out in this paper what is it that intention, and what are the things that I think by reading the introduction itself I can summarize what actually I intended to do. I shall be discussing the affinities of the style of narration rather than what is there in the text, the whole style. So, the style of narration of those two widely expressed concepts, namely the King Ram, popularly known as Raja Ram, and the philosopher King, through these two frequently quoted texts, that is Ramcharitmanas and the Republic. The reasons for considering this comparison of these two classical works are that both these texts narrate the qualities of a king, being significantly different in the cultural and historical character of the analysis. So, historically and culturally, both are different, yet they try to highlight that. However, the intention of analyzing these two different yet culturally rooted traditions on the same topic is to see a comparative, critical, and a hermeneutical trend. So, because hermeneutics is one of the integrated element of the narrative, which I think we are missing all the time. Because since yesterday we heard about narration, and then we are taking narration and the whole tradition of narrative in very lousy fashion. So we are taking it in a very popularistic way, which is not the case, because there are theorists who actually theorized very efficiently what exactly the narration and what are the components that needs to be there in narration. And in the first section of this paper, I try to highlight that, and how these two texts also incorporate these 3 elements. So, traditions on the same topic to see, as I said, the comparative, critical, and hermeneutical trend of these two drastically separate traditions of the topic of the king. How a tendency of narrative is built, how this whole tradition, the tendency itself is important. Hence, of the detailed analysis of this paper, I shall also be discussing the text, context, and the hermeneutical essence that is rolling around the term king in these two traditions. The second aim with which I wrote this paper is the striking constructs that I try to establish in these two styles of narration of those two traditions are employed, the concept of the virtue ethics and the essence of statesmanship, which is also there in King Ram. In both the texts, including the element of devotion, that is an excess in Ramcharitmanas, the essence of devotion. Thirdly, the third essence of this paper is also to explore the contemporary lost meanings of the dialogical methodology. Lost meaning is something which I am poaching for things are all narrations. So dialogy and the ways of this revival. As the study is purely based on descriptive, because it's mostly a descriptive and hermeneutical analysis, the only novelty this paper claims to achieve is the classical traditions of both East and the West, either rational or devotional, gave reference to the narration as a way of reaching out the masses. So the reaching out the masses is really important. That is what I think Professor Sinha was also emphasizing when he said that what is it that narration does to our world. And the revival of this might also help us understand the rich tradition of the world. So when we try to have even the comparative analysis, we always think that we are doing a comparison, whether they're similar or they're different. But comparison has a larger role to play, just to understand the world tradition in a very holistic way. That is also one of the intentions why I also took recourse to taking up these two traditions on this topic of a king. Hence the context, style, and the aim. These are the three things that I have looked upon in this paper, are the essential element this paper is proposing to objectify. In the following section, that is the first section, as I said, it is trying more on understanding the context of these two. And what are they? The narrative structure of Ramayana is not focused only on one context, as we already know, because it is not the one context that Rama winning over Ravana. So there are several peripheral stories, and that's why this vernacular way of approaching Ramayana also became popular after Tulsi Ramayana. And the reason why I have taken up that is because it had opened doors for vernacularization of Ramayana. So we can distinctively recognize several narrative states of affairs as conceptualized by the contemporary theories of narration, juxtaposing divinity alongside the ideal ruler. Now that has been the element in Tulsi Ramayana. So additionally, this can also be deduced that the reasons for several narrative situations and the dominance of the character vary according to the position of the narrators in different versions of Ramayana. And the justifications for the same can be seen as, and I quote, the narrative situations are divided into three main heads. Now, what are they? The first person's narrative situation, which is prevalent in Tulsi Ramayana, authorial narrative, authorial narrative situations, and the figural narrative situations. In the first person's narrative situations, the narrator has a right to bring forth the character from a totally imaginative structure. And this is where the mythos come into play. When we idealize and when we try to see Ramayana only as a mythical, the characters of Ramayana as a mythical character. So the first role is that when author tries to highlight it from a very imaginative structure of its being. So in the first person's narrative situation, the narrator has the right to bring forth the characters from a totally imaginative, that is fictional domain, where the characters are the complete replica of the imaginative or the real situation of the narrator. It could be physical, it could be psychical, or it could also be the social situation of the narrator. In the second type, that is the authorial narrative, emphasize the situation and the fragmented relationship with the author. So there is a gap. So that is, the narrator is outside the world of characters, which may not have a direct link to the author or the narrator. However, in the figural narrative situation, the narrator is substituted by the mirror image of the character, either the protagonist or the antagonist, whether it is Ram or it is Ravana. Even in Ramayana, that in some cultures, Ravana has been glorified. And in some cultures, in some writings, Ram has been glorified. Some are the perspectives which are written from a very feminist perspective, and we try to idealize Sita. So that is actually falling under the third structure of narrative. So however, in the figural, now that's a figural narrative situation, the narrator is substituted by the mirror image of the character, either the protagonist or the antagonist. So which one we choose, that depends on us, who thinks, feels, and perceives, but does not speak to the reader like a narrator. So there, the reader becomes the author there. So the reader has no choice but to look at the other characters of the narrative through the eyes of that character. So whichever is the central figure, and this is the reason why we fight. So when we fight over that this character is the predominant and that character has been suppressed, we are actually reading from a perspective, and that perspective is that the figural perspective. So the reader has no choice but to look at the other characters of the narrative through the eyes of the character. As there is no direct narrator, the character speaks for itself. And many clashes or many debates are done within this structure of narrative. So in the Ramcharitmanas of Goswami Tulsidas, these three aspects of the narration are intertwined in a very complex way. That with the theory of devotion, the inclusion of devotion along with all these three structures are there. But then here the figurative character, the lead character becomes Ram, and this is why Raja Ram. So the making a complex text for interpretation and meaning. For that matter, most of the writing, that is even the Puranic text popularly, and this is why we have Matsya Purana, Shiva Purana, Devi Purana, and all of that. So trying to figuratively projecting one character over the other and try to establish the symbolization of devotion. So moving back to the contextualizing reference of Republic, I think all of us already know, because it is one of the most quoted texts and also one of the most read texts in India, more than Ramayana perhaps. So I will not read out that whole thing, but maybe I'll just highlight one of the things and then I'll go on to the third section. I'll conclude. I'll just 5 minutes. I'll take another 5 minutes. The dialogue Republic carries a piece of historic political baggage against the backdrop of the ancient city-state we already know, where the Socrates, being the lead character, attempts to articulate the definition of justice through the discussion and dialogue, gradually unfold the systematic inquiry to the structure of the concept of an ideal king along with an ideal state. So this ideal state is somewhat in this section I try to see that is that ideal state is the Ram Rajya that we can also think of. So the second is the style of narration, which section which I'm not going to read out because it's a very 3 pages I have tried to deal, but then there were some of the elements which also gives rise to the style also gave as I said, open door for the vernacularity or the local languages to come forward and try to make Ramayana more popular amongst the mass. So and then the third section where I think a little bit of novelty I tried to brought in this paper is the telos. The telos and the ethos. So what is the ethos of Ramayana and what is the telos of Ramcharitmanas in the Philosopher King and the Republic? The teleological reference of Ramcharitmanas projects a life of a king possessing certain qualities with respect to self-discipline. It also projects a victory of the good over evil. The Ramcharitmanas of Tulsidas not only narrates the story of a royal family and dynasty that offers ideal and the interrelationship between husband and the wife, brother, and the other family members, but also establishes a sentiment over and above the characters and the stories. So the tale of Ramcharitmanas as a whole needs to be exclusively kept aside while analyzing the Ramayana of Valmiki. So when try to just suppose these two type of Ramayanas together, then we need to give weightage to these things. So in the Republic of the Ideal State, it's also a beautiful city and individual rule over by the philosopher King himself has been depicted. The reasoning of Socrates carries the conviction to the most of the hearers, and Socrates will not despair, believing that his words may perhaps bear fruit hereafter. So there Socrates is also trying to be very hopeful. So and there are instances in the Republic, especially in the Republic 7, when Socrates was very adamant while referring to the ideal ruler, and then he confirms it that it is only and only a philosopher king that can rule the world. Otherwise, others are only governed by falsehood, manipulation, and other things. So let me just conclude, sir. Just concluding line. So, if Ram in Ramcharitmanas is the narrative of a mythological hero, Plato's Republic idealized theoretically a philosopher king and his ruled city-state. From the epic Ramayana to Ramcharitmanas, the sacred and the classical narration shifts towards devotion and culturist ethos making. That has been the aim. Vernacularization of the grand narrative and setting a trend. So this trend has started from there. So that's where Tulsi becomes one of the pivotal figure there. The meaning becomes prominent over the given state systems of truth. Now, there is also a shift from truth to meaning. And it was a text of deconstruction. Sorry to bring this term here, but it is also a text of deconstruction, whether we like to accept it or not. It's a method that he had adopted, very subtle way, but then we have not addressed it yet. As a significant text in history, Ramcharitmanas has its importance in the transcending our fiction-reality dichotomy. So also the narration in Plato's dialogue. There also there is a fiction and reality dichotomy. Because when Socrates was always being hopeful in between his dialogues, and then he suddenly comes out and tells that this is something needs to be a philosophical one. So the republic, which narrates the qualities of being a philosopher king, who may or may not exist yet as a standard, it ever appropriates itself amidst the socio-political engagement. So even today, when we are surrounded by the social political engagements with the idea of ideal state and the King Ram, and the establishment of Ram Rajya. So what is it that we are aiming towards? Is it a philosopher king that we are thinking about, or an ideal state that we are thinking about, or it is the other element that overpowers us? Thank you so much for the patient hearing, and thanks to the chair.
Dr. Sindhu. Thank you. I thought you would end with the Jai Shri Ram. You didn't do that. So you please be. You will take a question if at all, because, yeah, you constructed so many theories and then you made this.
Even deconstructed.
So.
At the end, deconstruction.
Yeah, okay. What made you believe that the philosopher kings always possess truth? I mean, if one is not a philosopher king, one doesn't possess the truth. They have falsehood. Why this conviction that philosophers,
I will again quote Socrates here. It's not my word. Socrates' word is that if these qualities, because there are 4 qualities that Plato highlights in the Republic: courage, temperance, knowledge, and the justice. So if these things are there in a human being, that human being is always a better human being. And it's not that we are reaching at the ideal state is always in the ideal world. It is not in the real world. And that's where that duality still persists. And Socrates being hopeful to establish that ideal state is itself is a clue that is yet to. It's not yet.
Yeah, anybody, any younger student or a scholar will come back to you, madam. We prefer students first. Anybody? No. Oh, you have understood Ramayana, so they don't have. Please, it's for you.
Thank you for your presentation. Very nicely you have described all those characters. Mainly when we gone through the ideas of Ram Rajya, then it is always an idea. And we always a kind of ambition towards obtaining that kind of city or state. But as a human being, when we are not at all a philosopher, then what would be our mode of process, or in a sense, what would be our journey towards that state? We all know that we are belonging in a truth or falsehood in these stages, that always we are in a stage of truth and falsity are always there. So in that state, is it possible towards going towards that ideal state, which is a totally ideal state, can be obtained, but it is not possible that everyone can go to that state. So I think it is always would be a Ram Rajya would be always a kind of ideal state in that sense. And another thing is that when we are doing a hermeneutics towards any text, then texts are always a kind of interpretation in every context. It is varies. So when one interpreter is translated or interpreting a text, so in my own views always gives me my own attitude to interpret that text in my own way. So how can I interpret myself first, then I can interpreting the text first. So I think it always varies to man as well. The text is also not a contextually varied, as well as it is not fixed to everyone. So if anyone not believing the Ram Rajya, how he can interpret the text of Ramcharitmanas or all those things? I don't know you understand that point, that when anyone who is not believe the state of Ram Rajya do have any quality to interpret that kind of text, which is starting with the truthfulness rather than falsity. So is it possible on that way?
So, thank you so much, madam. That itself is the answer, actually. That when we deconstruct, so, and then when we say that it is interpretation is always context based, so the context will speak for itself. If I take a deconstruction as a method, then the context will speak. Here, the author is context bound, and if it is a context bound affair, the context will speak for itself, and that's where the openness will come. So, but to going back to your first question, that how to go about ideal state and whether it is possible or not, that's why it is ideal. Because if we meet, perhaps even if we reach that ideal state which we have envisioned, then there will be another ideal. So because by the time the context will change, so 10 years back, but whatever was the context, after 10 years the context will change, and that's how this process is ever moving. And the only way to understand is only through interpretation. So this is why interpretation has been taken as a very serious method for the contemporary thinkers.
Thank you.
So much.
Yeah. So with that, we would come to a close of the session. One big round of applause. These were excellent papers. We made a good beginning with some quite thought-provoking thought in the morning with our senior professor, and then we have another three speakers. You don't have to summarize it. The papers were pretty comprehensive, so we won't go for the reporting of those papers. We would ask the organizers if they have the next session. I'll read out the names. The organizers will take over. Sulagna Chatterjee, then Maumita Banerjee, Neelam Kumari Pandeji, and then Pushpanjali and Neha Kesari. So these five speakers will.
Excuse me, Professor Nataraju. May I take privilege to say a few words about the speakers who had presented papers just within 5 minutes, because it is my person.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you so much. First of all, Munmun Sen, who has presented paper. You have what is the gist of your presentation is that that Upanishadic fears don't try to formulate any philosophical theory, and that is not true itself. Just a minute, just let me complete. Because we all know that Vedic tradition or the Upanishadic tradition was the oral tradition. So with the help of dialogues or debate, I don't use the word, they try to explain the realities of the world and the very serious philosophical issues, and they are theorizing by the help of dialogue the theories related to the ultimate reality, theories related to the rebirth, the theories related to the karmas, and so on. But I would like to say that it is true that they are or they were not even interested to formulate a system of philosophy. They are not providing us any system which we have later on have, orthodox or heterodox. But it is to say that they simply dialogue with the persons and they are not theorizing. That is, in my mind, is totally incorrect statement. This is my first observation regarding the first speaker. And second for the Hari Narayan ji, you yes, yeah. So you have presented the Purva Paksha and Siddhanta, the ancient method of describing the philosophical theories and philosophical methods. I also mentioned this yesterday, but in the later part, when you said that and made a distinction between the narrow and the wider, open perspective. So your vision was that it is our tradition, Indian tradition, has not a wider perspective or wider vision. Somehow it is narrow when we are restricted to the Purva Paksha and it is only individualistic perspective. So that is also, myself is not agree with that argument, because we are very open. The system of Khandana and Mandana itself says first you have to listen to the Purva Paksha. You have to understand what he or she want to say, and then have a critical analysis of that particular content. After that, you have to either recommend or you add something, and that will be the Siddhanta Paksha, later Mandana Paksha. So it has very much openness within the philosophical debate or dialogues in our Indian system. And for the last, Sindhuji, you has talked about the narratives, and 3 types of narratives you have discussed. Here I would like to comment that it is true that in the 2 texts you have taken, Ramcharitmanasa and the Plato's, yes. Then there are figurative narratives. That's true. But I would like to say that sometimes narratives somehow begins with the facts. But I would like to say a little bit, you can say, in संकोच के साथ मैं कह सकती हूँ कि that the narratives given by some person are sometimes are based on the personal perspective or personal way of looking on the facts or the individuals or personal vision. They don't care about the truthness or reality of the facts. And this is the very sad portion or sad aspect of narratives. So this is my personal observation. I am not correct, maybe, but yes, please.
No, we are clear about your present. It's okay, please. It did not, because those were only remarks. That's all. These are not questions. That's no. These were only her observations on. It's more like the chairman observations. So we'll leave them there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I mean, those were her observations. I mean, I understand that you want to respond to, 3 of you want to respond to, but that's all right. So thank you very much. Thank you, the audience and our wonderful speakers. There was an opportunity to learn from you, all of you. And the tradition continues of the debates and the dialogues. And the narratives will also emerge out of the debates and dialogues that we conduct. That has been the long tradition that we have last, say, 4,500 years. If you take back the Vedic era to 2,500 instead of 1,200 to 1,500, as Radhakrishnan and others have done it. So if we stretch backwards, it's a 4,500-year-old, strong, robust, lively tradition that we have inherited. And the question of, delimiting the debates and dialogues, or to reframe it, the question of limits of reason, conceptualizing and theorizing, is to be balanced and is to be taken care very, carefully, in the sense that, where the reason stops and then where our inquiry enters into, metaphysical questions, one has to be pretty careful about it. Otherwise, by and large, it has been conceptual, rational exercise that we have. One interesting question that emerges out of this is only, since the organizer had asked me, a couple of comments, then, I'm venturing into. And one interesting equation that emerges is, in the context of the Upanishadic and Vedic thinking, a significant, departure you see from Greek thinking up to the Europeans is, it's about conceptual theoretic enterprise, theoria. And if you go by the whole idea of theoria, or as the very soul of philosophizing, conceptual, rational attitude as the soul of theorizing, then what happens is, what about a pre-reflective meditative lifespan? It's again the Heideggerian language. What about the pre-reflective attitude that we have with which we conduct ourselves in an everyday affairs? That's what Bhavani Shankar also was pointing out when he was bringing in the indigenous life model. Indigenous is also a difficult word, because when somebody is a colonizer, then you have an indigenous. We are all indigenous. So if we don't have, once you have a colonizer, then the word is good. So there is a difficulty to use the word whether tribal or indigenous. That's a hell of a business. But the whole idea is, in a pre-reflective mood, before reductionist attitude sets in, what is called scientism, before we have a reductionist attitude, which actually brings in, if you have a Krishnamurti language, it brings a dichotomy between observer and observed within the inner world, and it brings a dichotomy on the external world, the subject and the object dichotomy. The dichotomy sets in once the reason starts operating. So if you go by the narrow Greek definition that it is a conceptual, rational enterprise that we all indulge in, what we are actually, leaving behind is a pre-reflective attitude with which this Vyavaharika world runs. This is what Shankara terms as Loka Vyavahara. In Loka Vyavahara, we have this perception of unity of life. There is a unity with this entire life cosmos with which we run. But the moment we enter into theorizing and the conceptual world, there is a dichotomy that sets in between the subject and the object, and therefore the whole enterprise of theorizing happens. So when the Upanishadic thinkers, the rishis, were conducting, I believe it was a pre-reflective meditative enterprise. And in that only there is a unity of subject-object which happens. And there is a life out there, we are part of that. There is neither the rose petals, nor the color, nor the observer, but there is that experience. The experience. So in our analysis and conceptualization, the rose is lost, but we have the petals, we have the color, we have dissecting of the rose happens in this theory or enterprise. Therefore, there is a pre-reflective world out there. Then we enter into Vada, Jalpa, Vitanda, dialogue, and turn all that, all these 2 days, we turned the dialogue and debate into a narrative. We have built our own narratives, and that's a good exercise in a very, commonsensical way. And then, then there is another world that I look at, then the other world of transcending reason, the limits of reason, recognizing the limits of reason and transcending. Most of the die-hard philosophers do not accept this proposition. When Husserl attempted at doing it, he was dragged down by Heidegger into anthropology and psychological world. Even Sartre does that. So many of the, if you want to be recognized as a good philosopher in the, in academia, in the Western world and everywhere, it's better you don't speak about the limits of reason and transcend them, if you want such a recognition. But if you want to be a Vedantin, irrespective of the recognition, we do speak about the limits of thought, limits of reasoning by that, and then transcending of it in what is called as prasankhana paddhati of the Upadesha Sahasri, which speaks about what Professor Harinarayanji was mentioning, is about choiceless attention. That's the prasankhana paddhati of the Shankara in Upadesha Sahasri. So we have the choiceless attention with all the energies involved. I like that rightist approach, where the leftist has to be defeated. I read it that way. So that's what is happening in India, which is a welcome measure. Therefore, the Ramaraja. Thank you so much. It's, all credit goes to this wonderful organizer and the young team that he has, and an excellent, speakers that we have. We are enjoying this whole ambience that is set up, and all glory to this university and to the department. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. With this, we will. Thank you. Thank you.
So next session for the felicitation, I would like to invite Dr. Priyanka along with the students to felicitate the chair. And the names are here: Sulagna Chatterjee, Mamita Banerjee, Pandey Neelam Kumari, Dr. Puspanjali, Neha Keshri. They may sit. Is there Sulagna Chatterjee? You please be here. Why are you going here? They left in first session. That's why. This is This is Nigra's Thana. Don't have some presuppositions in your mind. Big clap for Professor Nataraj. He is our showstopper. Please be here. When I was conceptualizing these ideas, every day and night he have this, do this, change this, do this, change this. And that's how a 6-page document came into existence. And for this reason and being as the chairperson, please give him a big hand. Thank you. Professor Nataraj. This is a bandhana for you. रोज दिया, रोज दे दो. Thank you. And the head department of philosophy is going to welcome Chair Professor R.C. Sinha sir, a legendary figure in the field of philosophy and a guardian figure. ये जावेद सर का दिन बंधन है आपको. ये गुलाब, लाल गुलाब लाल. तो सुलग्ना, मौमिता, पांडे नीलम कुमारी, पुष्पांजलि एंड नेहा केसरी. कहाँ है ये लोग? नहीं इधर आके बैठे क्या है? They must have the experience of the chair. बैठ के करें ये लोग. Dice should not be empty. जितने इधर बैठ सकते बैठो. अच्छा चलिए सर शुरू करें. They are hesitating. You start. दिव्या जी, your session will continue. Who is another one? Param Prakash is not available. Will you please continue?
Hello.
And conduct also.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am.
अच्छा सर पहले स्टार्ट करेंगे. Chair. I do hope that you take care of the question. I'm going to start.
I am very much thankful to organizers and especially to the head of the department and Dr. Gautam and Dr. Sailendra, who have conceptualized this theme. Naturally, the theme is not very traditional one. It has got some newness and freshness. And I expect that presenter will also give a new thought. And certainly the treatment is very important in philosophy or in philosophizing. the presentation of the paper needs some newness. Otherwise, it does not attract the participants. So whenever you conclude, you must have some views, your own views, not that Radhakrishnan has said like that and Sri Aurobindo. You quote that, but you must conclude in your own way. Thank you very much. Sulagna Chatterjee, you introduce yourself and then start.
Thank you. I, Shulagna Chatterjee, a research scholar of Raiganj University, West Bengal, and now I am doing PhD under the supervision of Professor Dr. Triptidhar. She is here. And first of all, I would like to convey my gratitude to all the organizers and coordinators for giving us such opportunity to present paper in front of such eminent speakers, professors. And also I am thankful to them for their warm welcome. So due to time constraints, I am just going to present my paper, and I will just focus some points which I have tried to show throughout my paper. So title of my paper is Language and Intention, Naiyayikas versus Wittgenstein. So in this paper, what I have just tried to do, I just tried to study the Naiyayikas' philosophy of language and Wittgenstein's philosophy of language in dialogical method. And I have found that there is a good scope of research if we study them both in comparative way. So when I am saying that Naiyayikas' philosophy of language, then I intend to refer Naiyayikas and also Wittgenstein. I intend to mean and also emphasize the early period of Wittgenstein, and also some references I have chosen from his lectures through lectures. So without which act of our daily life we cannot even survive more than 1 minute is definitely the act of thinking. And language can be defined in general that it is a tool, and not just tool, it is a man-made tool to convey our thoughts to others. And not only our thoughts, we convey our intentions, our beliefs to others through the language. And words are regarded to be the minimal unit of any kinds of verbal language, and being constructed by sentences is one of the distinguishable characteristics of it. Language which is considered to be justified in this paper can be simply defined as a cluster of meaningful words, and those words are tuft of meaning-bearing words. As a natural language, gesture is considered as more basic than speech. So there are certain differences between verbal language and non-verbal language, and philosophers like Saint Augustine subscribes with that. The sign languages can be considered as more basic than any other verbal language. So, and also, Augustine's paralinguistic speech lies on an intentional elucidation of meaning. Intention refers to the goal or purpose behind a communication act. So, first of all, I would like to mention that in this paper, I will just try to create an imaginary conversation between Naiyayikas and Wittgenstein regarding the reciprocal relationship between intention and language. So, what is intention? Intention can be defined as a purpose or goal of our daily life, and what we just mean to say through our language. It also lies on our intentional act or our mental states. So not only sign language, interpretation and paralinguistic speech require intentional reciprocity between content of a language through which thought of a communicator has been produced and object of language, that is its direction towards the outer world. But also intention has a significant impact on other verbal languages also. For example, if we utter that bring that pen, then we have to know that what I am intending to refer, whether I am saying that I want this pen, or I am saying that I want my pen, which I am carrying with my. So this is like intention, and this is like a relationship between intention and language. Hence, language and intention are intricately connected aspects of human communication and understanding, and this relationship between language and intention is significant for any effective communication. In this connection, reciprocity of intention and language arises a question which is going to be studied through this paper from the perspective of Indian language of Indian school of logic, namely Noyaika's philosophy of language in one hand and Wittgenstein's logical approach to philosophy of language. Nyaya philosophy asserts that some words depict object in reality directly, whereas some are equivocal, meaning of which depend on subject's intention, which is shakkartho. Especially to Nobbonai philosophers, cognition of the intention of the speaker is considered as a condition for cognition of a sentence. On the other hand, in case of intending or meaning, Wittgenstein in his philosophical investigations asserts that meaning depends on context only instead of being controlled by any psychical or mental process like intention. Now, there are certain differences between Noyaika's and Wittgenstein's approach on language. First of all, I will mention some points which have been pointed out by Professor Kamaleshwar Bhattacharya and Professor Shivjivan Bhattacharya. Professor Kamaleshwar Bhattacharya, in his paper entitled On the Language of Nobbonai, an experiment with precision through natural language, opined for the novelty of Indian logic that as the language of symbolic logic has been developed for its application not only in logical domain but also in other disciplines in the West. So was also the language of Nobbonai in India. Nobbonai is used to be recalled as New Logic of India, which follows linguistic model. In his prolific contributions on Nyaya theory of language, Professor Shivjivan Bhattacharya exhibits Nobbonai's excellence in developing refined natural language devoid of inconsistency and ambiguity of ordinary language. I am skipping some points. Yes, sir. But one point I have to mention here, that complex facts like A or B like A is related to B, lies on qualifier relation which can be interpreted as whether property of B is in A by the relation of R, or conversely, A is the property locus of B in relation with R. There are some other certain differences between Nyaya and Wittgenstein's approach on language, although in accordance with the context of our presentation, we will mention some of these distinguishable characteristics. Number one, Noyayikas are proponents of natural language who give stress on object language, not on meta language. Along with other Indian philosophers, Nyaya school also agree that Sanskrit is a divine language as it is created by God, and relation between language and reality depends on God's will rather than humans' convention. Later, Nobonai takes note of the phenomena of creating technical terms and hold that the relation of meaning is conventional in the sense that it is created by the will of the persons concerned. Private or artificial language is such a kind. If it is used for communication, the relation of meaning between expressions of such languages and elements in the ontology is purely conventional. And Wittgenstein's language, whether may be called it as private or public, should be logical, which is conventional and purposive rather than metaphysical. Number two, spoken language is language in the primary sense according to Nobonai theory, and gestures and written languages only in a derivative sense are considered to be language. The commentators on Vishwanath make a distinction between so-called gesture language and written language by describing the former as...
Please conclude.
Okay, sir. So, what I have tried to show in this paper that there are some contrasting views between Ney and Wittgenstein regarding intention and language, and Wittgenstein did not support that there is a condition which is required to know our language, but the Ney philosophers asserts that if we have to know about the language, then we have to know the intention of the speaker. So this was objective of my paper.
Thank you very much. So,
I cannot.
two questions can be rather appreciated. Anybody? If questions or comment, if somebody wants to comment. So the teacher of the...
I want suggestions rather than questions because...
Hello, a good presentation actually.
Yes.
In your paper, you have tried to compare between Nye with Wittgenstein.
Yes.
But first of all, I think it would be better to understand in which context you have tried to compare with Wittgenstein with Nye. Actually, Nye philosophy is very known to us. But Wittgensteinian philosophy, when you have used that the language is different to Wittgenstein, it is not metaphysical, then some interpretations come out from there. Because some of them referred or referentiate, if we go to the interpreter, they are saying that Wittgensteinian language is more metaphysical than the epistemological. So first of all, I think we have to understand about in which aspect Wittgenstein is trying to use the word intention, and then you can just try to discuss all those facts. Then it would be better to compare with Wittgenstein with the Nye theory of language. It's my observation.
Thank you, ma'am.
So now,
Thank you.
please try to be free, and whatever you want to say, you must say very clearly.
Hello. Respected all the professors on the dais, good afternoon, eminent speakers, scholars. I am Dr. Moumita Banerjee, faculty from Damdam Motijil Robindra Mahavidyalaya from West Bengal, Kolkata. The title of my paper is Buddhist Dialogue, Transforming the Heart of Ashoka. So, my paper consists of, due to the time being, I am just focusing the what I trying to say in my paper. Thus, I discussed 7 to 8 topics or 7 to 8 points in my paper. The first point is what is dialogue, or what we have understand dialogues in Indian philosophy. The second one is the dialogue, the similarity. What are the various ways of Buddhism? What are the various ways of Buddhist dialogues? Number three, the similarities between Buddhist dialogues and Western philosophies, schools of dialogues. 4, the differences between Buddhist dialogues and Indian philosophical school of dialogues. 5, who was Ashoka? 6, what was the character of Ashoka before accepting or adopting Buddhism or Buddhist dialogues? What do you have to say? And the 7 is how Ashoka has changed his mind after accepting Buddhist philosophy. And 8 is concluding part. So today I am just talking about how Buddha's words changed Ashoka, who was a famous Ashoka. All we know that Ashoka was a famous ruler, a great king, Maurya, the great Maurya king, a great leader in an ancient India. He ruled over a big empire after learning Buddha's word, Buddha's teaching, Buddha's ethics, his ways. Ashoka changed his ways. He started caring more about people and being fair to them. Ashoka's changes made a big difference. His kindness and fairness made life better for many people. In short, Buddha's words transformed Ashoka from Chandashoka to Dharmashoka, and made a positive impact on many lives. But the main point, you can say that I am just conclude my paper to say that Emperor Ashoka's transformation through Buddhism, Buddhist ethics, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist dialogues may not have occurred through a specific or a special kind of dialogue in the conventional sense. Instead, his conversion of Buddhism and subsequent change in governance or personal conduct were likely influenced by a combination of factors, including exposure of Buddhist teachings, personal reflection, and moral introspection. Buddhism always emphasizes ethical conduct and moral integrity, and Ashoka, upon adopting Buddhism, sought to govern his empire with justice and fairness, guided by ethical principles. So, however, it's essential to note that Ashoka's embrace to Buddhism was a gradual process, not a sudden process. It's a gradual process rather than an instantaneous change of mind through a single dialogue. His encounters with Buddhist principles such as non-violence, compassion, and moral conduct likely occurred over time, shaping his worldview and guiding his actions. Thank you, everyone.
So first of all, you introduce yourself.
A very good afternoon to all of you present here. I am Neelam Pandey, Assistant Professor in the Department of Philosophy, GLA College, Plamou, Jharkhand. I am delighted that the organizing committee invited me in today's seminar. I express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Shailendra sir for providing me with the opportunity. Although I feel I am not an expert in the subject area, yet I love to share the ideas of the topic to the best of my ability. I welcome any questions or discussion to further explore the topic. The topic of my presentation for today's seminar is exploring existential themes in the dialogue of Yam Nachiketa in Katha Upanishad. As we all know that Katha Upanishad is one of the most profound philosophical and spiritual texts I feel that there could be two ways to approach the ancient text. The one is the traditional way, that is to take a text, go slok by slok, and from one chapter to the other chapter. And the second approach could be to go out of the frame and to able to connect with the text, to be able to connect with the words and interpret their meaning. This I find more significant because these works are not meant to be limited in within a frame. They discuss several important issues relating to life through the allegorical stories. The timeless dialogue between Yam Nachiketa and the Kat Upanishad illuminates fundamental questions about life and human experiences. I have tried to explore existential themes such as freedom, angst, existential quest, etc. in the dialogue of Yam Nachiketa. I will mention some passages which reflect these themes, these existential themes. So the story starts very simply that the king Uddalak is performing a sacrifice. He is giving away certain things that are worn out and have lost their utility, and his son Nachiketa, a 9 to 10 years old boy, is watching his father, and he thinks that his father is doing something that is not right. Like a very modern rebellious son, he says, "Dad, you are wrong." Nachiketa points out that you are giving away those cows to God that are worn out, have no milk left, and can only drink one more time water. After that, they will perhaps die. This is not how the sacrifice is done. Now, this questioning of Nachiketa to his father represents the existential themes. To ask a question of right or wrong is a very common and existential phenomenon of ordinary man. In our daily lives, we do question several events that we think to be inappropriate. Similarly, the individual Nachiketa too was not preoccupied by any presuppositions, and he freely exercised his freedom in challenging the social values of that time and regarded his father's actions as unethical. He was not influenced by any external authority, but he, using his inner conscience and curiosity, and surrounded by the actual such situation, he got very anxious and led to ask questions of the wrong deed that his father did. Now his father gets very angry and does not respond to him. Nachiketa finally asked, "All right, to whom would you offer me?" His angered father exclaimed that he will offer him to the god of death, Yama. So the son takes it very seriously and goes to the abode of death. Now, many people ask that what was the process that he go to death, and what is the utility of death here, and what does it signify? Literally, the death. Literally means the termination of being. It is a constant process of decay which ends in death. It is the most fearful event. The mere idea of death ruins the value and meaning of life. Now viewed existentially, death here, I think, is a metaphor of the impermanence of life and the uncertainty involved in it. These uncertainties of life produce a profound sense of uneasiness, which is known as distress and anxiety, etc. Although they are the negative experiences, they provide us with the opportunity to face the situation and make life more meaningful and be a true authentic being. The realization that life is valuable is possible in anxiety only. It must be noted that the highest knowledge, our awareness of ourselves as a true authentic being, the value of life, the realization of one's freedom is possible in distress itself. Nachiketa, after going to the abode of death, he waited there for 3 days in hunger and thirst. This span of 3 days represents the distress, the patience, and the commitment of Nachiketa to gain the true knowledge. He was committed to seek knowledge. No difficulties changed his mindset and purpose. This incident offers insight into unraveling one's potential to understand the meaning and purpose of life. Now, after when Yam returned back, he saw a very young Brahmin waited for last 3 days. Yama got very pleased by Nachiketa's patience and commitment and granted him 3 boons, one for each night. Now, these 3 boons, it represents the freedom that we exercise in our daily life and reveals the urgency to make a choice. Now, every individual possesses the capacity to exercise their free will and make choice. Nachiketa wisely utilized these boons to seek answer to the existential questions related to heaven in his second boon and the nature of soul in the third boon, which is a way of the human soul. The dialogue offers a unique perspective on personal responsibility and the choice individuals make in shaping their destiny through spiritual evolution. Kat Upanishad teach the importance of courage, commitment, and self-discovery through positively exercising one's freedom to define oneself and face various human experiences. The second boon on the question of heaven and the third boon on the question of soul, apart from signifying existential freedom, also refers to the existential quest that every person seeks at some or the other point of life. During our life span, we surely at some point of time have a quest regarding the nature of self and heaven, such as what is heaven, how does it looks like, is there a life after death, what dies, self or body, what happens to the self when we die, is rebirth a real phenomena, etc. Such a similar quest of young Nachiketa regarding the nature of self and heaven is illustrated in his dialogue with Yam when he asks for his second and third boon to seek existential knowledge. Uh, I would like to conclude my paper. What basically I've shown in this my paper is that basically we all human being, we have two kind of consciousness. The one is the finite consciousness that represents Uddalak, and the second is the infinite consciousness that represents Nachiketa. There is always conflict between these two kinds of consciousness that we face every day. Egoistic consciousness wants to hold things back, and the infinite potential self always endeavors to explore things. It helps one to discover one's true self and value life. Thus, Yamna Chiketa's dialogue invite readers to engage in introspection, self-discovery, and the pursuit of spiritual knowledge, highlighting the transformative power of individual choice and the pursuit of highest truth by the exploration of one's experience. Hence, the existential themes that we discussed above are relevant and thought-provoking for individuals seeking a deep understanding of their lives in the face of uncertainty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any question or comment? So please, if you have got some question, no, I will put one question. So certainly, the dialogue of Yam and Nachiketa in Kathopanishad,
Yes, sir.
and you have put the title Exploring Existential Themes.
Yes.
So suppose I say that it is a very far-fetched comparison because existential thoughts are very recent one. What is your conclusion? How you relate existential themes with the dialogue of Yam and Nachiketa?
Yes, sir. Yes,
You have tried, but
yes, sir.
you can explain more.
Yes. See, sir, although both this, one is the ancient text Kathopanishad and the other is the existential philosophy, which is very contemporary one. Although both belongs to different cultural and philosophical background, but what I find common is that both seek to discover the true authentic self. Even in existential also stress to face the uncertainty of life and to define and the search for the true authentic being and the true life. Similarly, the Kathopanishad, the protagonist Nachiketa, he also tries to explore the reality of life, and he also faced difficulties in his real situation, but still he was determined and committed to find the true knowledge. So this is the ground for my comparative.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Puspanjali. Puspanjali is there? Oh, hi. So please introduce yourself.
Yes, sir.
Respected guys, and you all, namaste. I'm Dr. Pushpanjali, and I used to teach in Ranchi University since 2018, and now I have joined in a school, high school in Sivan, and I have written 3 books, and the one book that is based on the poetry form, means the whole philosophy of Lord Buddha. It has been written in poetry form, either his biography or his philosophy.
My topic is the philosophical build-up of children through pedagogical tool of philosophy having vital role creating idiosyncratic society. I have written this paper in English, but I would like to present my paper in Hindi. मैंने ये पेपर इसलिए चूज किया क्यों ये जो टॉपिक है टोटली चिल्ड्रन पे कॉन्सेंट्रेट किया हुआ है. मीन्स आज जो फिलॉसफी है, दर्शन है, सभी लोग बुक पढ़ लेते हैं, उस पर बुक्स दोबारा आ जाती है, बट इसे एक्सप्लोर नहीं किया जा सकता है, मतलब नहीं हो पा रहा है. ऐसे एक्सप्लोर करने के लिए दर्शन को, फिलॉसफी को सोसाइटी तक रीच करना पड़ेगा, फिर स्कूल लेवल में भी इसे रीच करना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि जब तक बच्चे फिलॉसफी के बारे में नहीं जानेंगे तो वो आगे जाकर उतना अच्छा इन्फ्लुएंस उनके लाइफ में नहीं दे पाएगा फिलॉसफी. मीन्स मैं कहना चाह रही हूँ कि फिलॉसफी को जानना और महसूस करना दोनों दो चीजें होती हैं. मीन्स अगर बुद्ध का क्षणिकवाद है, इसे जानना और महसूस करना दोनों दो चीजें होती हैं. और अगर कोई स्टूडेंट 12th लेवल पे भी नहीं पढ़ा है फिलॉसफी, अगर वो ग्रेजुएट लेवल पे फिलॉसफी पढ़ रहा हो तो उसे क्षणिकवाद एज अ डिफिनेशन और जानना ही सीमित रह जाएगा, उसे महसूस नहीं कर पाएगा. इसलिए मैंने ये टॉपिक लिया था ताकि इसे ब्रॉड लेवल पे एक्सप्लोर किया जा सके, खासकर स्कूल लेवल पे भी इसे स्टार्ट किया जा सके, जो अभी नहीं हो पा रहा है. मैंने अपने इस पेपर में, और जैसे कहा जाता है कि फिलॉसफी बहुत ही क्रिटिकल सब्जेक्ट है, इसे बच्चे समझ नहीं पाएंगे, बट ऐसा नहीं है. बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें हैं, टूल्स हैं जिसके थ्रू बच्चों को इसे पढ़ाया जा सकता है और समझाया भी जा सकता है. जैसे कार्टून के थ्रू, पोइट्री फॉर्म में, और 10th और 12th लेवल पे इजी वर्ड्स में इसे समझाया जा सकता है, पढ़ाया जा सकता है. तो क्योंकि जो बच्चे हैं वही आगे जाकर सोसाइटी को क्रिएट करने वाले हैं. अगर बच्चे अंदर से एक अच्छे इंसान नहीं बन पाएंगे तो कोई फायदा नहीं है दर्शन पढ़ने से, क्योंकि दर्शन को पढ़ना, जानना और उसे इम्प्लीमेंट करना दोनों तीन चीजें, अलग अलग चीजें हैं. दर्शन एक ऐसा सब्जेक्ट है जो सोसाइटी को कंप्लीटली चेंज कर सकता है, चाहे वो सोशल इशू हो. जैसे सोशल इशू में हो गया, जैसे दहेज प्रथा है, और जैसे जब विवाह होते हैं तो लोग देखते हैं कि लड़कियां कैसी कैसी दिख रही हैं, मतलब फिजिकली अपीयरेंस पे ज्यादा फोकस किया जाता है. तो इसे फिजिकली अपीयरेंस पे फोकस ना करके इंटरनल जो क्वालिटीज हैं उस पे ध्यान दिया जाए तो ज्यादा अच्छा है. और ये कब होगा? जब लोगों में फिलोसफिकल थॉट्स डेवलप होंगे, लोगों में ये एहसास होगा कि लाइफ एक दिन खत्म हो जाना है, ये स्टार्ट हुआ है तो, और इसे हमें एक अच्छे तरीके से एंड करना है, एंड पे पहुंचाना है. और इस हिसाब से मैंने अपने पेपर में बहुत सारे इसके सॉल्यूशंस लिखे हैं. और जैसे आत्मदीपो भव है, आपने बहुत बार देखा होगा न्यूज पेपर में कि बच्चे सुसाइड कर ले रहे हैं, मार्क्स अगर अच्छा नहीं आ रहा है. बच्चे तो छोड़िए, बहुत सारे 1-2 IAS भी हैं जो सुसाइड कर लिए हैं, जो ऑफिशियल और घर के ट्रॉमा को हैंडल नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. तो इसके लिए क्यों जरूरत पड़ जा रही है फिलॉसफी की? इसीलिए कि सेल्फ रिफ्लेक्शन है, सेल्फ स्ट्रेंथ है, ये डेवलप करने को, और ये एक बार में नहीं हो पाएगा, ये इनिशियल स्टेज से ही करना होगा. और इसलिए मैं आरसी सर से भी यहाँ पर हैं तो मैं बोलना चाहूंगी कि यही कुछ कर सकते हैं. अगर स्कूल लेवल पे स्टार्ट किया जाए, जैसे 11th-12th में तो बच्चे पढ़ रहे हैं, बट मैं सरप्राइज हो गई कि वहां मात्र एक स्टूडेंट है फिलॉसफी का और एक भी नहीं, और वो भी उसे पता नहीं है कि फिलॉसफी दूसरे सर ने कहा कि ले लो तो ले लिया. तो कंडीशन बहुत ही ज्यादा खराब है फिलॉसफी की. सिर्फ ग्रेजुएशन लेवल पे, पीजी लेवल पे ये पढ़ने से फिलॉसफी का जो असल मकसद है, व्यू है, वो इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं हो सकता है. इसलिए इसको अगर कोशिश की जाए कि 9-10 से ही स्टार्ट किया जाए फिलॉसफी, that will be best result for the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, questions are invited. Comments too. Anybody? Because I cannot. Uh,
जी सर।
वो तो आरसी सर को हैंडल कर चुके हैं।
और डॉक्टर
आरसी सर को हैंड ओवर कर चुकी है अपना।
नहीं, डॉक्टर ब्रजभूषण
जी सर, मैंने बताया कि जी
पुष्पांजलि।
जी सर, मैंने बताया कि उसे जैसे कार्टून के फॉर्म में, जैसे बच्चे हैं बहुत एक्टिव होते हैं, चीजें जो विजुअल होती हैं वो चीजें बहुत जल्दी पकड़ते हैं, समझते हैं, उनके दिमाग पे बहुत ज्यादा गहरा असर पड़ता है। इस वजह से मैं कह रही हूँ कि लोअर क्लासेज में कार्टून एंड पोएट्री फॉर्म में ये स्टार्ट किया जाए और आगे जाकर धीरे धीरे। जी 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 मैं वही अच्छा ठीक है सर। मेरी जो टॉपिक है द फिलोसॉफिकल बिल्डअप ऑफ चिल्ड्रेन थ्रू पेडागोगिकल टूल ऑफ फिलोसफी। मीन्स पेडागोगिकल टूल ऑफ फिलोसफी है सर। मीन्स किस तरह से उस टर्म्स को रिप्रेजेंट किया जाए कि बच्चे को अच्छे से समझ में आ पाए, बच्चे उसमें इंटरेस्ट ले, समझ पाए ये चीजें। जैसे कहा जाता है झूठ नहीं बोलना चाहिए, बट व्यक्ति हर कोई जानता है कि झूठ नहीं बोलना चाहिए, बट जहां झूठ बोलना होता है बोल ही देता है। तो ये क्यों? क्योंकि इच्छा शक्ति, विलिंग पावर कमजोर है। हैबिचुअल जी जी
इधर आइए।
ठीक। और आप कुछ सजेशन देना चाहिए?
नहीं सर, अगला।
अच्छा, आपके अंदर पीएचडी किया?
नहीं सर, हमारे यहाँ पे जाएंगे।
So, I think last paper of this session, Neha Kesri. नेहा केसरी।
वो चलाएंगे। आप आइए।
इसका एब्स्ट्रैक्ट कहाँ पर है नेहा का?
दोनों जेंडर नहीं भी हो सकता है। आपका इसमें है
एब्स्ट्रैक्ट छपा है?
हाँ हाँ।
पेज नंबर
लास्ट में नेहा पेज।
ठीक है, पेज नंबर 27।
Okay.
अच्छा।
So, hello everyone and dignitaries. I am Neha Kesri. I am doing my master's in philosophy from Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, basically, so first of all, I want to convey a message that I am a MA student and this is the first presentation of my life. So please grant me if I commit any mistakes or error. So the title of my paper is The Riddle of Non-Being, Analyzing the Debate on Empty Terms Between Naiyayikas and Buddhists with a special reference of Nagarjuna's Vigraha Vavartane. The main focus of my paper is on the emphasis of non-being. So the very often the questions like why is there something rather than nothing occurs in our mind, and it implies that what there is and what there is not. Can we at all know what it is like to be? The question of being is there in the Heidegger, in Tagore, everywhere we can find. And also a fruitful epistemology and metaphysics has been done on the question of being, and left to the question of non-being. So my focus is on non-being. So the question is like, can we at all? It is not. So many philosophers argued that we can know it, like many philosophers argued answered no to this question, that we cannot know what there is not, because for them gyatvatva and astitva are same. And for other philosophers as well, they said that we can know the non-being. Now I related this issue of non-being with the issue of empty terms. Why? Because the empty terms, what is the empty terms? Empty terms are terms what supposed to non-referential entities in this world. If I say the pen, the word pen has a reference which is in my hand. But if I say the son of a barren woman, it doesn't have any reference in this world. But what is the paradox I focused in my paper is this: if I say the son of a barren woman is tall, certainly the statement makes sense, but it does not have any reference in this world. So the paradox lies in the fact that even though it has meaningfulness, but we don't have any reference to convey it. So this is the basically paradox which is related to the non-being, because non-being also is talking about what there is not in this world. Okay, so now as I have said, next slide. No, speaking about empty. Yeah, so as I have said that there is a problem regarding the cognition, like how to situate how to situate empty terms in our cognition, how to think about empty terms. Beside these difficulties, there is also difficulties involving to speaking about empty terms. For example, I have written here that if I say the son of a barren woman is tall, it may be false. Like one can say and like say that okay, we don't know about what is the son of a barren woman. We don't have any reference. But if I say the statement the son of a barren woman does not exist, I am actually accepting your statement only, that okay, the son of a barren woman does not exist. So it makes perfect sense and it is true after all. So the problem lies both in the cognition regarding empty terms and also the speaking about empty terms. Now these issues stayed alive both in the Western and Indian tradition. In the Indian tradition, I have focused Nyaya and Buddhist debate on these empty terms. Next slide. Okay, so what is the view of Nyaya on empty terms is basically that Nyaya ruled very simply that okay, these sentences whose subject term does not refer to any real object in the world are demonstratively false. And the reason behind is this, that the subject term can be traced back to some kind of erroneous cognitive state. They simply holds that a statement which involves empty terms are patently false. This is the blunt view of Noyaics. Now, Russell also similarly stated the same fact like this. Russell also said that statements which involve empty terms can be paraphrased into such logical forms as will make them patently false. And I have written the criticism of these views by Meinong, which is he is also a Western philosopher, but I'm not mentioning it here in my presentation, which is there in my paper. Now, next slide. I brought a Nagarjuna's Vigraha Vavartini to instantiate this, like my view, properly. Vigraha Vavartini is a text by Nagarjuna where the main thesis of Nagarjuna is this, that intrinsic exist. And the reason of bringing this text and the thesis is like is the reason of this, that the intrinsic nature does not exist. If you see, the intrinsic nature is according to Nyaya is an empty term. Why? Because Nishwabhava, we don't have any reference of the intrinsic nature or the Nishwabhava. So I brought two objections by Naiyayikas against this thesis of Nagarjuna. So first objection goes like this, that if the things had no intrinsic nature, then even the name, absence of intrinsic nature, that is Niswabhavata, would not exist, for there is no name without an object. And also I've tried to formulate it in some kind of logical analysis. If you say that this thesis is a kind of universal proposition in a way that whatever exists is void. Void, why void? Because it does not have any intrinsic nature. And now, if the contraposition, we know the immediate inference would be like this: whatever is non-void is non-existence. Now, Nayayika's point here basically is this: in order to instantiate your view, we need to bring some agreeing and disagreeing example, Anvay and Vyatirek Drishtanta. But okay, Anvay Drishtanta would be fine. But what about the Vyatirek Drishtanta? Can we ever bring some example which is non-existent? And if we bring this, like, I don't know, we can't bring something which is non-example. So something which is non-existent. In this way, Nayayikas criticize the Nagarjuna's thesis. Now the reply would be, no, first slide only. The reply would be like Buddhist would say that, okay, your position would involve self-contradiction because you are yourself mentioning an unreal entity in your speech act. Next slide. I have also stated one more objection. Nayayika is raising objection that it is only an existent object that is negated, non-existent one. It is related to Nayayika's view of pratiyogi. Like abhav should have a pratiyogi. If there is I'm saying that there is a abhav of chair, so there is something called chair, then only I can say that there is a abhav of chair. So if intrinsic nature does not exist, then how can you even to like deny it that that intrinsic nature does not exist? So again, the reply would be applying the opponent's logic against them only. They would say that, okay, you are criticizing my theory of voidness, and you are accepting that voidness is something which is nothing there in this world, but you yourself is denying something which is non-existent. So the next slide. So basically both these two objections involved, I found an inner contradiction, because if you see that the first objection assumes this fact that, like, what Nayayika's view is that there is no name without an object. But in the second objection, they themselves claiming that only an existent object can be negated. But in the first objection, they themselves negating a non-existent thing. So this is how Nayayika's objection themselves involved in contradiction. Next slide. Okay, so now as to sum up, so basically the Nyaya Buddhist controversy, we have seen the overall controversy through the text of Vigraha Vaivartini. So basically this point I have highlighted, that Nyaya wants to exclude from logical discourses any sentence which will ascribe some property to a fictitious entity like a son of a barren woman, Akash Kushan or something like that. While Buddhist, on the contrary, argues that it is possible to talk about fictitious object, otherwise one cannot even deny it successfully. We tell fictional stories, we talk about we in our general language we talk about ghosts and some. So how to make sense of it? So as I said, the paradox which is there but still the paradox there. But okay, next slide, conclusion. So I can conclude by saying that even though both falls into themselves, as I have shown that the Nayayika's points commits an inner contradiction. So that is why I found little more problematic to Nayayika's point. And also Nayayika's views on empty term doesn't match with their theory of error. I will not explain it too well because it would be great, like it would be a big discussion. I have written it in my paper. So, I in this debate I found Nayayika's point little more problematic, and Buddhist point is like more convincing to me. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Have you completed your?
No, I am in my master's last semester, fourth semester. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
If somebody has got some question or comment, madam, as a token of appreciation, you can get some comments.
Very nice presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Actually, to my concern, you have very elaborately discussed all those points. First of all, I think you have not, you actually mentioned empty stage, empty objects. But is there any relation of empty objects in the logical sense that we are using in the Venn diagrams or in the other sense? Actually, you are comparing Nayaikas with the Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah.
But Nayaikas, so far we are concerned about Nayaic philosophy is much related with the Western philosophy of language to
Yeah.
some extent.
Yeah.
So, on that angle, if we are comparing Nayayika logic with the Buddhist philosophy, then the basic differences are all there. Because Buddhists are not realistic at all. But they are accepting empty objects in the Nagarjuna Vigraha Vyavartani, as that's all. But if they are both basically different, basically their philosophy starting from the day one, they are different in every aspects.
Yeah.
So how you are trying to a comparison between Nayayikas with the Buddhism, because in Buddhist philosophy several schools are there. Yogachara and Madhyamika, their philosophies are different on that angle. It would be better, to my suggestion, if you trying to establish one school with the Nayayika philosophy. It would be better in that sense. It's my own object, aspects to understand your thought of empty states that you have defined here. It is my concern.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I will definitely think about it. Thank you for your suggestion.
So, head of the department is here, and if you want to give your reflections, so please.
No, sir, I don't. Just, you know.
So you want to give some reflection, please. No, but if you want to make some reflections, so I will certainly. I have got impression that papers presented here are certainly a very good standard. So normally in the Hindi belt, we don't find such type of technical philosophizing. So naturally the last paper, Neha Kesri, she has done a wonder in the sense that being the student of MA, how she selected the title of the paper and formulated his point of view. So she deserves all the, every presenter, they deserve appreciation, but she deserves a special appreciation. So regarding first paper was on philosophy of language, and my question was that comparison between Wittgenstein and Nyaya philosophy, or with any Indian philosophy that requires serious care. Care in the sense the comparison may lapse into far-fetchedness. And we do that. When we compare Wittgenstein with the Nyaya, or when we compare Buddhism with existentialism, we have to take care. So that is the one suggestion, because at this stage, when all the papers have been presented in a very neat and clean way. So the second paper was regarding exploring existential theme in the dialogue of Yam and Nachiketa. So certainly explaining the problem and debating or exploring the whole theme is very fascinating, in the sense that this dialogue has been very famous, and you have done certainly a good job by formulating the topic. Here, formulating a problem, that is a way of philosophizing. Philosophizing is not simply quoting or writing, but the way you have formulated the title, that speaks about the style of philosophizing. So I was simply wondering that the titles have been very much formulated in a very analytic way. The one paper, the philosophical, yes, the paper by Dr. Puspanjali. So she has expressed her anxiety about the fate of philosophy, and naturally that is when I was the chairman of the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, so we had one seminar, how to introduce philosophy in the school stage. So, but we have in Bihar, we have introduced it in +2, but there is a paucity of students, and the teachers. Some of my students, they are teaching, but they have been appointed there. But the students, they hardly take interest at the school level. So that is a problem. But this sort of seminar naturally inspires others. So philosophy, the infrastructure of Magad University is quite impressive.